You
That's
might
right.
consider something rude that I would not consider rude.
Yeah, right. Could be
Right?
cultural differences, right?
It could be cultural. It could be how I grew up. It could be that, my family is all rude to each other, and so we're just rude. Who knows?
True. Yeah, yeah. But it could be love, right? It could be that's how you guys express love, actually.
Oh, I think those helicopter parents who come in, and the moms and dads who come in and take care of the kids and don't let them try anything hard. That's
Yeah.
love. But
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands on Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you.
Chris, here it is again.
what is it, Scott? What's going
Seems
on?
like this comes up every single Friday, Chris.
What's going on Fridays?
We just sit here and talk, and there's a certain number of people that actually want to listen to us.
We
It's quite.
BS. BS for 2. We say it's 2 hours and it ends up being like 12 hours. Yeah.
Mhm. Anyway,
And then
it's just I do have.
we say we're going to record every time we talk, and then we talk and forget to record. I mean, it just,
Yeah, that's something. That's a mental problem, I think. But anyways, we'll work through it. Hey, so anyways, today it's Podcast Friday, Chris. I
Podcast
can't remember
Friday?
what episode this is.
I think it's 24, I think.
Getting
But,
higher than I can count.
I
Okay,
can't
that's
count. Yeah, exactly. I can't count that high, so.
And this is what I'd like to talk about, Chris, today. I'd
All
like to
right.
talk about what we were talking about before we started this, actually, if you're up for that. But
Sure.
this is what I'd really like to talk about, because we talk about a lot of logic and critical thinking, and that's important. I think we should still talk about that. But Chris, I want to talk about love today.
Love.
Love.
Okay.
That's right.
I think
I want to talk a
I
little.
think in typical format, I don't know if your definition of love matches my definition of love, so we
Of
probably need
course
to talk about that
Yes,
too.
of course. So let's argue about it. Then that's hopefully we get a good argument going, and we'll get some good we'll get a good little clip that people want to like watch, actually. So
So why
yeah.
don't you make a statement about love, and I'll tell you if you're wrong. I'll just tell you why you're wrong.
Let's just get to the point. Well, it's something that I don't understand that much about love. I think it's super important, and I'd like to learn more about it. And maybe one of these days we ought to look for like a love doctor or somebody that knows a lot about love to come on our podcast and tell us about it.
A love doctor, okay? As long as it's a PG episode, or I guess we're gonna.
Well, one of the cool things, and I don't know much about this, but I think I've told you I've studied Greek a little bit.
Yep.
And we just have one word for love, and we have other adjectives that will change the definition. But Greek has several words for love because they know that it's sort of too big of a thing to just fit into one word. So
Well, we have other words. Our problem, we've got other words that are much more specific, and we steal them from other cultures, like amour and things like that, right? But I think the problem we've got is love. We use as a blanket word to mean lots of things, which is
oh
why the
yeah,
definition is important, right? Like,
yeah, it's like you love your pizza or you love your wife. Same word, but
do you
hopefully,
remember growing up as a kid in like a third grade? Oh, I love pizza, and someone goes, "Why don't you marry it?" or something like that. I mean,
um,
because you can't love an inanimate object or whatever the term is, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true, but we use it all the time.
yeah, yeah, we all the time, constantly. Um, but I think surprisingly, most people know what we mean when we say something like that. I mean, they say if you love your kids versus you love pizza, most people know what that means, right? Because they will have a similar feeling that they can associate with, and they're like, well, I know technically, like, I know what you mean when you say that.
Well, there's not that much controversial about loving pizza, so no one's gonna argue with you that your definition of love is wrong unless they just want to be, irksome.
Well, yeah, it's like sort of like if
Now,
you're
if
talking,
you were to tell me you love pineapple on pizza, we might have a different comment. I say, what do you mean by love?
love, yeah. Well, people love different things. It's yeah, it's challenging, right? Just
But I
like we
mean,
talked about before.
is it the same thing? Is loving pizza and loving a person the same thing? Because we're using the word the same
No,
way.
it's something different. I mean, it, yeah, that's why we got to talk about it. We got to maybe try to define it, put
So
some parameters
contextually,
around
both
it.
people, the person who says and the person who hears "I love pizza," you said we tend to know what we mean because in those are socially understood situations to use the word.
Yeah,
You could use "I love sports," "I love football," "I love baseball," right?
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm just looking up some definitions right now on the dictionary. It says an intense feeling of deep affection, a great interest and pleasure in something. Is love for football. There we go.
Yeah, those are very different meanings, though.
Yeah, but still
Do
though
you
it
have
brings up,
affection? I understand you have pleasure in eating pizza. Do you
yeah.
have affection for pizza?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define affection, right? Like
We're gonna have to
everything.
we have to redefine every word.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, they make this thing called a dictionary. And so somebody's actually done this work already where they go through and they try to define words. And usually what happens, Chris, I'm sure you know this, is that you'll have many different definitions of a word, different context, that it can be used as a noun, which is a person, place, or a thing, or it can be used as a verb, as an action word. So yeah, that's why this is complex. That's why you get off on a tangent of interpretation and trying to understand what the Bible says in the original language. It's complex because what do you mean by this word? What did the people that wrote it mean by it? What was the culture at the time?
Well,
And
even without getting to that extent, because you're going historically, I mean, let's just talk about, you said there's a dictionary. How many
yeah,
people know of a word, they know the word, but they don't really have the right definition down, if you were to go by a dictionary definition? Or how many people have put it through a filter like, this is the way my family interacts. Families love each other, so this is what love looks like. Right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of differences that can creep into it, even though we all think we know what it is, and we all think we're pointing to the same thing, the same word, the same definition.
yeah, yeah. I'm watching this really kind of cool show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do a little shout out. I think it's called You, and it's on Netflix.
Okay.
And it's definitely a freak show. And this guy basically loves people so much, he calls it love. It's probably more of an obsession or an addiction, actually, that he ends up killing people that get in the way. He ends up kills the person because they run away. So it's it definitely, helps you define love in an unhealthy way by watching the show, and it's very entertaining. So it's interesting.
Um, well, I mean, you could say, you expect people to sacrifice for love,
Yeah,
right? So at what level does the sacrifice become wrong? I guess would be the way to look at it. What rules are you going to put into play that says that this activity, beating someone up, killing them, I don't know, firing them, you know,
it
swatting them,
depends.
calling the police department, having the SWAT team show up at their house, whatever. At what level does that become wrong? Is it
Yeah,
by the definition of crime? Is it by the definition of some ethic of good and evil? And where do you define that?
yeah, yeah. That is the problem. What's the source, right? Just like we were talking about your CGM, your blood measurement numbers before. Actually, it's like in order for a number to be true or to be accepted by a bunch of people, you've got to compare it against something. You've got to have some sort of reference standard somewhere, right?
Well,
That
and
you compare it against.
so the problem is we need a reference, a measurement, a KPI, a key performance indicator, whatever it is. We need something to be able to objectively point to so that we can compare everything to that objective assessment. The problem
Yeah,
we have is it's really hard to do that sometimes. So
yeah,
we all form our own kind of wishy-washy, objective idea. It's not truly objective because it's through our own filter. And then we
right.
try to apply that against a measurement.
Yeah, Yeah,
Like
to the
if
best of our ability. Yeah,
you
that's
might
right.
consider something rude that I would not consider rude,
Yeah, right. Could be
right?
cultural differences, right?
It could be cultural. It could be how I grew up. It could be that, my family is all rude to each other. And so we're just rude. Who knows?
True. Yeah, yeah. But it could be love, right? It could be that's how you guys express love, actually.
Oh, I think like, those helicopter parents who come in and the moms and dads who come in and take care of the kids and don't let them try anything hard. That's
Yeah,
love, but
yeah.
it's not constructive, I guess maybe is the term we want to
Could
use
be.
there. But
Depends
does
on what.
love need to be constructive?
Yeah, could be what your job as a parent is. It depends on how you define that.
So if my metric is to make strong kids, maybe that's wrong. That's not the right kind of love.
Yeah, right, right.
If my objective is to keep my kids safe for as long as I possibly can, maybe that is love.
Could be. Well, and ideally, you want to do both, right? Simultaneously somehow. That's when it starts to get much harder, right?
Well, I agree with you, but are you sure that that's the ideal?
Well, I would think most people would agree that, yeah, you want to make your kids self-sufficient. Yeah. I mean, I think most people would agree to that.
Yeah, but if you're rich enough to just buy everything they need, why do you need to make them self-sufficient? You can build a world around them that takes care of them.
Yeah, yeah. Many people do that, actually. Many people do
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you that hardship is what makes people grow in life.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of hardship in the world today compared to 50, 100 years ago. So where we develop our strength is a lot more deliberate. You have to put yourself in situations where it's difficult, like when you like to go to martial arts, or if you go to the gym, or if you get a job doing something you don't know how to do to force you to learn how to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
you have to knowingly take those risks now because just living by itself has gotten easier over the
So
millennia.
easy. Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
Makes
as
sense.
AI comes along, we were talking about this a little earlier too. I was commenting on the number of people I meet who just haven't played around at all with AI. And it's been one of the biggest things in the news for the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And I'm
And
like,
it's accelerating.
they've heard of ChatGPT, but that's the one that gets all the news. So of course they've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. It's all
I,
correct.
just earlier today, I went to a website that makes PowerPoint presentations for you.
Yeah.
And it has an AI, so you can single prompt, and I give it a prompt, and it produced a very pretty, good-looking PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I did it to show these other people in this group I'm in that they could do this. And they're saying, does ChatGPT do that? No, this is not ChatGPT. This is a tool specifically designed for this purpose.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they couldn't get their mind around the idea that this was an AI who had a focus of just making presentations.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like person. It's just like, some guy's a plumber, some guy's a neurosurgeon, somebody's a proctologist, right? They all got their thing,
But I don't think people realize that, ChatGPT is a very specific flavor of AI tool.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. If you don't know what it means, everything's AI, right? Until you start to nitpick and you start to learn, and you're
Well,
like,
when your refrigerator has AI in it, and when your toilet seat has AI in it,
it's
and
just
it
semi
does,
AI
they
thing.
advertise it that way, right? I mean,
Yeah. It's like tools. It's just when you start to dig in and start to understand the true nature of something, which I
could
think
I make a
is,
claim that this water bottle is AI powered?
I mean, you could if you wanted to. I don't know if you'd be right or not. I mean, some people you'd be right to some people.
I'm sure I could craft a narrative about how AI was used to create and engineer and blah 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 blah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's a special shape, and somehow it does something special to the water that makes it more pure or something, and therefore you get hydrated more effectively by the shape of this
Okay,
water
you
bottle.
just triggered something. This is off topic. We'll have to come back after this. But I was going through a phase where I was trying to figure out how to, here in Southern California and where we're at, we have a lot of hard water. The water that comes into the house has a lot of minerals in it. So it's hard water. It does damage to the pipes. So I wanted to get like some way to treat the water, like a whole house treatment system. But I
Yeah,
was looking for alternate ways to do this that I didn't have to have a machine that I would have to maintain.
yeah,
And one of these things that came up, and there's a fair amount of videos on this, was to run the water through basically a filter with a bunch of round marbles in it.
Oh,
And by
interesting.
running the water around the marbles, the water spins around at speed, and it uses centrifugal force to spin out the minerals. And I'm
Well, how
like,
about that? There you go.
well, and I'm like, okay, I get the centrifugal, I get all that. How in the heck does running water by a bunch of, by a bunch of marbles do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And there's people
Mhm.
who believe this, and I'm like, to me, this is pseudoscience at its best.
I mean, it could be pseudoscience. I don't really know. I mean, ultimately, though, as long as the person believes it, then it is true, right?
Well, you could measure the water going in and out and figure
Yeah,
out
right.
if it did have
Right.
any impact. And it does then in that case, it doesn't matter if I believe it or not.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean,
That
the
goes back to the metric. That would be a metric, right? I would say I've got a measurable the way to measure if this thing I'm putting in between the initial and the result, if this thing in the middle does something, then I should have some kind of measurable result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And that's the whole essence of like science and the scientific method is like we've broken this really complex world down into something that you can measure in a discrete kind of way. And and that's beautiful. I mean, there's so many things you can do with that. And at the same time, I still believe we're missing a lot of stuff, right?
We are missing a lot of stuff, but
And
what?
how do you measure that stuff, right?
Well, if we don't know what we don't know,
Yeah.
does it matter that we're missing that stuff? I mean, in
Uh,
5 years' time,
yeah.
we find out that we should have been measuring I don't know, the helium content of water. I don't, you know,
Well, I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm talking about stuff like love. Like, how do you measure love, right? I mean, you can
do you
see
need
it
to
through action.
So is there a particular number of love that you want to get to in a measurement?
Well, I don't know. It's not like you can hook a multimeter up and just plug into somebody. Oh, you got some.
So you need the love multimeter. Here, hold these two electrodes and let me measure your love.
You love, yeah. So, how do you measure something like that? I mean, you can certainly see it, and you can see through actions. Like a mom, it's like, wow, that mom really loved her kid, right? In
Well,
that
the
particular
thing is,
instance,
we tend to associate sacrifice as being one of the things that we would
that's
show.
one of the key
Right?
things.
You're
Yeah,
sacrificing
exactly.
something of yourself on behalf of someone else. You're
Yes,
showing care for them, and we would translate that into love, right?
yes,
But someone who gives their life, that's kind of the ultimate, right? Someone who
yeah,
gives money, if you're rich, it may not mean much. If you're poor, giving money might be a huge deal, a huge
yeah,
sacrifice,
yeah,
right? So someone who is very considerate and does things on your behalf that you don't even know about could be
yeah.
actually have love for you, but there's no visible way for the recipient to understand that,
Yes, correct. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yes,
And so sometimes it's like you need to tell people I love you
yeah,
as something you need to say. But then some people aren't comfortable saying that. So if they hear someone saying that, they may not view that as truthful.
yeah. Right, correct. Yeah, yeah.
So, but why do you want to talk about love? Why is it so important that you want to talk about it?
Because I think it's way more important than logic. And
Okay.
we put so much value on logic, and logic is incredibly important. And the
So
idea is I want to talk about love, but I want to integrate the two together because I think together they're more powerful than separate.
let me ask you this for clarification. When you say love, are you using it as a proxy for feeling, or is feeling something different than not different? Is
I don't
feeling and
know.
love
That's a good
not the
question.
same thing?
It's definitely part of it. The feeling part is part of it. Yeah. And that could be maybe more of the selfish part of it, right?
Is love a feeling?
Ah, it's a good question. I don't know.
Because
That's
we
what I want
often
to talk
we
about.
often kind of look down on we're often saying don't let your feelings control the way you act.
Yeah, don't let them control. Doesn't mean you
But if
don't acknowledge them, but don't let them control you.
but if love is in fact like the ultimate you're talking about, maybe you want love to control the way you act.
Well, I don't want the feeling that love can provide to control you necessarily. It's like you've got to use logic and critical thinking to love well. It's
Okay,
not just pure
so
emotion.
you added the word well to that.
Yeah,
So
right.
now you're differentiating how love is expressed.
Yes.
You're not differentiating the feeling of love. So back to your idea of the show you're watching where some guy loves somebody, some girl, and kills a bunch of people to do it. Who was it? What's his name? Who tried to kill Ronald Reagan in the '80s? Didn't he say he was obsessed with Jodie Foster or something like that? And
Something like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Something.
yeah. So that is that a form of love with really bad expression, or what?
Well, I think he may think it's love. I think to the other people on the other side of it, they're like, that's not love. That's something else. That's obsession. You need medication. You need, right? We need to get rid of that. You need
So
to
is
go
that? But
behind
is that
bars.
person? Let me ask you this: someone who says, "Okay, I love this person. I'm obsessed with them. Whatever it is," and in order for me to express that, in order for me to realize that, I need to eliminate this other person.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that a logical? Isn't that a logic argument there?
That's certainly some kind of whether it's valid logic or whether it's good logic. That's a that's a problem. I don't know. It could be.
So
It
is that
depends.
good love and bad logic, or is that bad love?
I don't know, Chris. I don't know.
I
I
just turned on
don't
my
know.
fan, so if you're getting background noise, let me know.
I don't have any answers to this. All I think we should do is we should just at least sort of talk about it and acknowledge it because if we want to be great logical thinkers, which I think we should strive for that, but I think we have to learn to love well simultaneously.
So when we were talking, we were trying to come up with guiding principles. Was that what we want to call what we were talking about earlier this week?
Hmm.
Right. We talked about don't let your feelings control you, or let your feelings lead your. Or, what did we come up with?
I don't know.
We're
We
so
need to.
we're so brilliant when we're not recording ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote some of those things down, and I think so. The objective, I think, of what we want to do is start to put some of this stuff down into writing. So if our listeners want to follow along on our journey with us, our personal growth journey here, they can travel along with us. And I know I want to do it personally too, because I want to start to get better as well too. So we carefully think through these tools and principles and ideas and make sure that we're following them even when it becomes hard or
So
uncomfortable.
one of the exercises I'm doing is to try to better refine and define and refine my personal brand. You know,
Okay.
and
Okay.
coming up with, oh, I want to be able to teach people critical thinking so they can make their lives better.
Yeah, right.
But actually what I realized is the real drive that I have goes much closer to your thing you've talked about in the past of wanting to teach. I'm not
Yeah.
sure it's that I want to teach. I want to learn. I love to learn. I want to know how the world works. I want to know how,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the reason I want to know how is because the better working model I have of the world in my head, the more value I can show to somebody else that they can then have the power to make positive changes for themselves. And critical
Yeah.
thinking is one of those tools. It's not the only one though.
No, no,
Expanding your knowledge, understanding the world, understanding science or physics or whatever expertise you want, and having a balanced viewpoint that isn't centered around feelings or individuals who may have a bias in play, right? When you
yeah.
follow a YouTuber who's got a bias and you just parrot what they say, but being able to do that. So being able to share with people or show them things that they then have the power to use to make themselves better. I'm
Yeah.
not making your life better. That's not my job. It's your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
But what I can do is show you things that I've learned or things that I understand with a hope that you can then take the action to make your life better.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. You're teaching them. It's your
Yeah.
teacher, basically. Some
And
form
and
of
I know
teacher.
I default to logic a lot. We talked about this earlier too, right? Is I default to logic before I let the emotion come into play.
Yeah.
So I actually tamp down the feeling, think through the logic, then add my emotion to it. Where I think a lot of people, maybe the majority, go the other way. The emotion comes into play, and then it's hard to impose the logic on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's got to be some kind of balance, right? And I have no idea what that balance is. But I know that the balance should be, in my mind, something that neither one completely controls you, right? It can guide you and lead you, but you don't like blindly follow something.
Yeah, and blindly following anything, right? I mean,
It's dangerous,
well,
right?
so going back to one of the other ways of persuasion that Aristotle had besides logos, the first one was ethos, right? So ethos is authority. So that would be God. That would be people of authority within your community, and that would be your parents. And when you're a kid, I think following what your parents tell you to do relatively blindly is probably the right thing because it keeps you safe and alive in a world that could hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
But at some point, kids go through, they start learning stuff at some point. They start getting their personal identity. And then right when they're beginning to really learn to think and understand and put things together, they get hit with all the hormones and then emotions all kick in. Right.
Yeah.
So you're going through this, follow what your parents say, start learning things in school, start learning logic, start learning science, whatever you want to call it. And then right when that starts to pick up, now we're going to throw all these emotions on top of it.
Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in my mind, that's almost the flow that society goes through. You've got people in power who have a vision, who tell you what to do. And at some point, the average knowledge base of the regular person goes up. The Industrial Revolution required people to have more knowledge to be able to build and operate the machines that were out there. Right.
Yeah.
So that goes up. And so then logic becomes the way to improve life, and science or technology becomes that tool. And then at some point, when science and technology take away the threat of dying from all of us, the emotion starts to kick in. So we're, and I think the uncontrolled emotion is a problem, right? I think that's what wokeism is, whether it's left-wing wokeism or right-wing wokeism, and there is a right-wing wokeism. It's letting your emotion dictate how you act with people to the point where you throw out the ethos, the authority, you throw out the logic, the science, and you're stuck with just everything based off emotion, which is not a healthy balance.
No, and it's not pleasant either. That's a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, basically, right? Is what that looks like.
Yeah, but that's what happens, right? It's like, who was saying that? Someone this week was saying that it's not the left against the right or the right against the left. It's not that they're attacking each other. It's the left attacking everyone who's not left, which includes the middle.
Yeah.
And right now, the right is open to accepting the people in the middle, which is why so many people kind of moved that way in the last election. But at some point, the extremist right side is going to start pushing back against the middle, and some of the middle will start to go the other direction. Just it'll swing back and forth. But it's like instead of like the guy I hate is the guy opposite me, it's like the guy I hate is anyone who's different from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to me like the way the world has developed technologically, the wealth we have, the ease we have in society has made us forget how harsh the world really is. And then we can worry about things that, you talk to someone in a culture that doesn't have what we have, they've got much more serious problems to deal with than, I don't want to pick any one thing, but, than some of the other stuff that goes on today.
Yeah. I'll pick an example of, you fight somebody in a third world problem. It's like, look, I'm having trouble just getting food and clean water.
Yep.
I really don't need to color my eyelashes. That is not, on the top of my mind what color my eyelashes are.
Well, I was thinking, what belief do you have that you think is so important that you are willing to fight and yell and scream and be rude to other people about? I mean, well, it's first world problems on steroids is kind of the way it is.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's so much a belief system, it's a fear. It's like there's an underlying fear that happens, and you're like, oh, I'm in danger, so I gotta fight, right? Because this other person's gonna do something bad.
Is that where cancel culture comes from? The fact that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and therefore nothing he ever did is of value suddenly?
I mean, potentially. Yeah, it's sort of a black and white thinking, which is a logical fallacy here, right?
It's black, but so you're saying the black and white thinking comes as a defense because of fear?
I think it's we're driven by fear. Yeah, I think most of the time it's fear. Yeah, exactly. By
So
fear
I'm
of change.
afraid of people who don't 100% agree with me because I feel in danger. So I'm just going to attack anyone that is not 100% aligned with my thought.
I mean, it's maybe a little more complex than that, but I think you got the gist of it there in my mind,
So how
the
do
basic.
you, since it's really hard to talk to someone who's extreme on either side, the information they're using to work off of is not necessarily a logical thought. How do
Yeah.
you address the inability to communicate with them? How would you approach that?
Well, you have to meet them where they are, right? That's the key thing.
So if you make them not afraid, is that what you're thinking? If
Well,
you
I
can take
think
away their fear,
if you can enter into them in some way where they're not afraid, at least the fear will go down a little bit, and then maybe some sort of rational thought will start rising back up again.
well, you've heard the meme that went around on the internet, what, a month, 2 months ago about man or bear, where it's like would a woman prefer to be, was it stuck on an island with a random man or a random bear? And a large number of women would prefer to be stuck with a random bear than a random man because the worst the bear could do would kill you.
Yeah, maybe, and I don't know if they really believe that or if they really thought that through. Is that just the popular thing to say
Well,
these days?
it fits in with this meme or this idea that men are dangerous, right? And of course, if you wanted to bring in the horrible action someone could do against someone else, besides killing them, there's a lot of things less than killing them that could be degrading, that could be damaging, that could be harmful. And if you really think the average man is going to do that, then maybe it's the lesser of two evils is to get killed.
Well, here's the thing. It's like I think all men should be dangerous, have the potential, but then they're tempered through love and discipline to be able to
But
only
Scott,
let that out. It's
I'm
sort of
trying to view this through why would someone make this argument that they would prefer to be with a wild animal rather than a random wild animal than a random male?
Oh, okay.
And
So in that
right,
particular case, I don't know if they really believe that. Are they just saying it? Or do they 100% believe it? And would they actually choose that? Those are different. People say things and what they do are different.
admittedly, but the fact that what they're saying is so drastically different than the way you and I see the world makes me wonder: do people actually see the world such that the 5% or 10% or whatever of men who are bad players or bad actors represent 100% of the men in the world?
For them, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well then, and your reality is your reality, whether it's factually true or not. Your reality is your reality.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. But and that's where I think our little saying is don't let your emotions totally control you. You're like, okay, this feels really true. This feels really dangerous. Now let me go confirm if it actually is or not. Just because you feel you're in danger doesn't mean you're actually in danger. And just because you feel you're safe doesn't mean you're actually safe, right?
Okay, yeah, I agree with you, but my question then is, if I feel unsafe,
Yeah.
how do I get to believing I am safe? Even if my feeling says one thing and the facts of reality actually contradict that, how do I reconcile that and come to the conclusion that my feeling is not what I should be listening to here?
Well, so when you say the facts of your reality confirm that, you may feel that those facts are true, but you have to ask, I'm making this assumption. I'm having my worldview based upon that these things are true. And so I think what you have to do is step back and say, how true are these things? Are these really
All right.
100%
Well,
true?
let's look at it. I go look at the news. I hear all these crimes. I hear of violence and rape and murder and all these things that occur. That's what the news feeds me. So,
That's
oh
what you
wow,
see.
there's a lot of violent crime in America, right?
Yes.
Then I hear, oh yeah, this person used guns. There's a knife over here that someone used for this purpose. And then you hear about, out of England, you hear about these groups that started rape gangs, and they were grooming kids to be
Yes.
victims.
Yes.
And you go, oh gosh, all these bad things are going on, right? And then you hear about societies where men have the rights and the women don't have the rights. And if
Yes.
that's what you are feeding into your head, those are all facts of information. They may not be statistically the norm or the majority, but if that's what you hear, you have now a lot of factual information that says to you, this idea of men being dangerous is true.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So again, why would I, if I've got enough facts, if I've got 3 or 4 facts that back up this feeling I've got, what's to make me question that and actually look further?
That is logic. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to saying, I need to suspend my feeling and use more of my brain to see how true this actually is. Because it
But
feels
I just applied logic. I said, okay, I've got this feeling. I think men are dangerous. Let me go and verify this. Well, the news is showing me dangerous men. I see the prison population numbers. I go through all of these things in my head, and I go, oh, men are bad.
well,
Right?
and you can do
That
that.
is logical. It's an incomplete view of the world, but it's logical.
It's incomplete, but you don't get all the data, right? So I guess my question to that person would be like, do you know any good men? Is there any good men, right? And they probably would say, well, yeah,
Their
there's some,
dad or their brothers, maybe.
right, right, maybe there's
Right?
some, right, or
But
something.
and then it would be like, oh, but that's because they're family. So my point here being, what gets a person to question a feeling or a belief enough that they can suspend the current thought, go out and find research and do it, and look it up and analyze it and say, is this true based upon what the information I was able to gather? Because based upon the information they were able to gather, it's true. So how do I expand it to actually show what I would say the reality of the facts that are out there?
Yeah, I mean that technique is logic and critical thinking. So you start teaching the techniques
But
and you start
isn't it logic and critical thinking? If all I see is the negative, there's all the facts that I've got because the news media just gives it to me, or social media just gives it to me, or
yeah, right.
whatever.
Right,
If
right,
all
right.
the facts that I have are negative, and it's not a real representative sample of the facts of the world, but it's the facts that I have, then it is logical to me that someone comes to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, yeah, right. I don't have a problem with that.
Well,
You,
what I'm saying is, you're saying logic and critical thinking are what's going to fix this, and I'm like, no, people are applying logic and critical thinking already in that scenario. The
yeah, but
problem
it's
is
the distorted logic. It's not accurate. It's not clear and accurate thinking.
the logic is perfectly fine. The information that's feeding into it is the problem. It's not enough information or poor information or whatever you want to say. I think the logic is sound.
Well, I mean, assuming the logic is sound, assuming that that person honestly believes that's all the information that's available. But I don't think anybody really.
Well, Scott,
We could be wrong.
let's look at stereotypes, right? We've talked about this before. If I only ever met one Japanese person in my life,
Yeah.
then my understanding of what a Japanese person is going to be based off that one experience. And if that one experience was this is a short guy, 5 feet tall, he was wearing a business suit, he had glasses on, dark hair, and he bowed all the time.
Yeah.
If that was all I had, then my assumption would be that is all Japanese.
Well, I mean that's some really bad logic. I mean, I wouldn't want you to do that actually. What I want you to do is say that's one case. I'd be like, how many Japanese people are there in the world? You come up with some number, right?
Okay,
Millions.
I
Sure.
meet a second person, and they're almost identical to that because
Okay.
stereotypes come from somewhere, right?
Yeah,
So,
right. Okay.
and I meet a third person, and they're within a 5 or 10% variance of that. So
Okay.
now
All
I've
right.
built this image in my head from the 3 Japanese people that I've met, that this is the way all Japanese people are. I
Yeah,
haven't
right.
seen the people with the blonde Japanese, like the kids who do their hair up. I haven't seen the tall Japanese. I haven't seen whatever it is, right? So what I'm getting at is the stereotype is it's a logical thing for your brain to do given the limited facts. So
Yeah.
if someone has limited facts, and it could be limited because they're not doing their due diligence or because the media is biased or whatever, So I'm actually making the argument here that I don't know that logic by itself will fix things. There's things that have to go with that logic
Oh,
in
okay. Well, it's
order to come.
possible. I suppose. I mean, I'm not going to argue too heavily against it, but I'm saying it's not good logic. You have an incomplete form of logic. So then, if you want to start to understand trends, there's a whole science of statistics and probability that walks you through how to choose a good sample, the math behind it to actually get a pretty darn true case of what
No, you're
actually is.
talking scientific method and research. That's not logic. Logic is the how you process information to come to a conclusion. It
Oh,
doesn't.
no, no, no. That's a
Yeah.
form of
No.
logic.
No.
I'm
No.
going to
No. No.
argue.
No. 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 Because you can have very good logic, but if you have bad information, you come with the wrong results. The
Well, you're
logic itself is sound.
so as usual, you're completely wrong, right? So I'm going to go ahead and try to get you squared away
See,
here.
you're applying your engineering mindset to this, and I'm applying my theoretical research mindset to this, which is that logic is a tool, and it's only as good as what you put into it.
Logic is a tool, but you can use, but here's something, logic is very special, right? Because you can take the most simplest of things and apply logic, and you can build up from very simple things to complex thoughts and ideas that are logically sound, that are pretty darn accurate. And this is
You can
called,
also take bad information and use the sound logic to come up with bad outcomes too. And
yeah, but
the
yeah,
the
but
input the input
yeah, but
matters, right?
here's the part you're missing, right? So the logic, if you have a good understanding of logic, the logic gives you tools to evaluate information to determine what your confidence is on how true that is. That's statistics. So there's tools that's available to help you with that.
So statistics is not logic. Statistics is statistics.
Statistics is built up from logic, though, is what I'm saying. It's built up from math and things that are solid, that are
How is
true.
that? Okay, I'm not against that idea, but I'm also not for that idea. So defend
Okay.
that to me.
See, I don't understand how to derive statistics from fundamental logic. But I'm sure if I wanted to, I could go on YouTube and I could find out somebody could build this branch of mathematics up built on very solid logical principles. And they'd have a bunch of proof to get that. Or I would say that, yeah, that's like actually true. So that's a very powerful tool.
I think you're conflating logic and scientific method.
Well, you have to define what logic is and what scientific method is then.
To me,
I
logic
might be conflating them, yeah.
is the process by which you analyze and understand information to derive other ideas and thoughts and information.
So you're saying that's your definition of logic?
That's my definition of logic.
See, I would much rather have you say that's the scientific method, where logic is something different.
Scientific method goes into going out and getting samples and being open to contradiction and trying to disprove yourself. There's a whole bunch of other aspects to that. That's scientific method. Logic is A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. That's logic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no, you know, by the way you're talking to me, it sounds like if I say, all carbs are the same. Sugar is the same as starch, is the same as complex carbohydrates, is the same as whatever. And we know that our bodies react differently to that. But logically, they all are a set number of calories and they're a type of fuel source that the body uses. They're all the same. I would say it's logical to say that all carbs are the same. It's also not true. It's like the old calories in, calories out is all you need to know to lose weight. It's sort of true, and there's logic behind that, but the logic is missing out on a lot of complexity that's there because it's not even looking at the complexity that's there. It's not looking at the fact of how our body processes certain carbs versus other. It's not looking at your genetics. But logically, it's right. Calories in and calories out. That's all that matters to lose weight.
Well, and I guess, see, we always get twisted up in these same kind of discussions, and I don't know how important they are. I think the importance of what we're talking about is very very unimportant, actually.
Because to me, logic is a how.
Well, everything's a
Scientific
how.
method is a what and a how. Is a what that we apply logic to, and the logic is the how. Logic is a tool used in scientific method. It is not scientific method.
I suppose. I mean, I guess. I mean, yeah, maybe.
So to me, this is crystal clear in my mind. It has been for decades in the way I think.
So I guess, okay, so then who cares? What's the point? What's your point, right? Who cares?
Well, because you were making the claim that when someone comes up with a wrong conclusion because their facts are wrong or limited or whatever, that was bad logic. And I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with the logic. The logic is fine. What's bad is the information going in. It's like they ate pure sugar versus eating some other form of carbs, like carrots.
Oh, yeah, see, I
Right?
think we're arguing about something that's completely irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. And we tend to nitpick on little
Well,
things.
no,
We miss the forest and we talk about one tree.
because you're claiming that if they had better logic, they would come to the right conclusion or the better conclusion. And I'm saying no, it's not the logic that's at fault. It's everything else that fed into the logic that's at fault.
Okay, whatever. Who cares? I think it's such a non-important point that it's
No, because my
really
question is my point being they are logical. Their logic is fine. The problem is they're not seeing all the facts they need to see. You're saying their logic is at fault, and so I'm saying no. We don't attack their logic. We give them the information. We somehow have to find a way for them to learn the information that they apply the same logic to that they're currently applying, and they come up with a different result.
I mean, that may work. I don't know, actually. I mean, I'm describing it as when I say logic, their method of thinking. They're letting their emotion overrule their logical ability to think and look at data.
I'm saying they're starting with a feeling. I have a feeling that, back to
Yeah.
the man-bear thing, that men are unsafe.
Yeah,
So
right.
I've got this feeling. And when I go out to find factual information, I find that the news media shows me all the violence that happens on TV because they do that because of ratings, right? They do that for a variety of reasons. But those are the facts of information that I have available to me. And so now I make a logical conclusion that, yes, I'm right to feel that men are unsafe.
Well, I'm going to reframe it. I'm going to say those are the only facts that I'm willing to look at because I've already made up my mind and I've got confirmation bias going on.
Sure, but there's logic behind confirmation bias. It's logical. Confirmation bias means that you actually have logic and you're just finding the information that confirms logically your conclusion.
Well, I think if Mr. Spock was here, he'd say that's not logical to think that.
No, I disagree. I think Mr. Spock would say, given the facts that you have available to you, you do your best to figure out the result. If I only give you half of the information, you can't expect to get the same result as if you have it all.
Well then, okay, so then let's actually go some because all we do is we argue about stuff that I think is super important and we never actually get to anyway.
And I think this is essential. This is the reason why we're having a hard time. How do you teach someone to look beyond the facts they see?
How do you teach somebody to look beyond the facts that they choose to see? I would change that.
They see. Media is giving me all this information. I go and do a search on Google for whatever, violent men, which of course puts a bias on it immediately. But the idea being, oh, here's the facts of all the violent men.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess we do need to work out this simple stuff first. So then next time we do our podcast.
How do you get the person to ask the question, am I seeing everything here? Do I have a bias here? Is something happening here that I'm actually misinterpreting what's real because the things that I see are all aligned with the result I'm looking at?
Well, I don't know, Chris. I can't even have a conversation with you because we can't even agree on the most basic of definition of tools. So I don't know. I mean,
The scientific method is a tool. To me, logic is a how. It's a tool. And the argument I'm making here is I think a lot of people actually apply logic to reinforce the feeling they have. So the problem here is they're not expanding their understanding of the world, their knowledge of the world, the facts available to them, and incorporating that. Now, if you give them all that and they still filter it out because they ignore it, that's a different bias there. Right? That's true confirmation bias in the fact that I see 100 different pieces of information, I cherry pick the 10 that I want.
Yeah,
as opposed to I only see the 10. Therefore, the logic that goes through that, it's a different thing. To ignore facts and come to a conclusion, and to not know facts or not see facts, aren't necessarily the same thing, especially in a world that is so biased in what it feeds us.
Could be different. I don't know. I mean, I'm you got me stuck on what is logic. And I guess I need to go back and research that before I can answer your question. I
Yeah, we
don't
had this
really.
argument on first principles the other day, and first principles kind of aligned with what you said, but kind of didn't align with what you said, and more aligned with what I said.
Could
So,
be, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you might have confirmation bias because you think you're right, actually.
well, yes, but what if I am right? So my
Well, no,
confirmation
you
bias is
could
true.
be. You 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 could be, but you have to. If you're a good scientist, right? Then you have to be open to the fact that I could be wrong, right?
Sure.
Okay, good. As long as you got
Which,
that, that's all.
which is why I want to hear the logic behind what you're saying. So, I mean, we got stuck on constraints last time. We were talking about, is it a constraint or is it a first principle?
Yeah, those are different things, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are different things. But they're mixed. I mean, they're not obviously different. And you could with reason say, okay, yeah, they're close enough in certain cases. It depends, right? Depends on how nuanced you want to be.
I don't think you can. That's the thing is, I don't think a constraint is ever truly conflatable with a first principle.
Oh, see, I think it totally could be.
I
And I know
think a
you're going to want an
constraint
example.
can filter out which first principles you apply.
Yeah, I don't have like a super precise definition of these, but maybe this is the problem. Maybe this is what we need to work up, and maybe we need to struggle through this to actually agree on something that most other people will agree on too. Get very clear definitions of this.
So, in a scenario like the man versus bear thing, I think the question you need to ask is the first thing is what's the feeling? The feeling is I'd be the number of bad things that could happen to me are less than with a bear than they are with a man. Right. And where does that come from? The idea that the viewpoint that men are dangerous. And where does that come from? That comes from anecdotal experience, from hearing stories from your friends, from seeing things in the news, all that kind of stuff. Then you have to have enough understanding of the world, understanding of the way media works, understanding of the way social media works, to know that that information might not be the complete picture. Then you have to figure out how can I get a better picture of what's going on? How can I get more information, more facts? Then how do I process those? And if they contradict the bias I already have, how do I reconcile that with my current biased thinking?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think we just have problems with labels. Like, so what do you call that process then?
So what I'm getting at is we can't say they've got bad logic, which is what you said. I don't think they have bad logic. I think they have bad information, which leads to bad results. I think the logic is still the same type of logic you and I would apply in any situation.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, see, I disagree with that actually, which means we have a under different.
And that's what we've been arguing here. Is that you're
Yeah.
arguing that a bad result is a result of bad logic, and I'm arguing that a bad result is a result of bad information, and that the logic may very well be sound. It isn't always sound, but I mean it may very well be sound.
Yeah, see, I don't agree with that. I think that basically it's a bad application of logic leads you to a wrong conclusion.
So what is a bad application of logic?
Bad logic. It's like you don't understand logic. You're using the tool incorrectly, actually.
I, I need an example of that because I can't articulate that as something that I would be able to define to someone else.
Well, I'm
A
not
bad
prepared to
application
give
of
you an
logic
example.
means what? How
I
is
mean,
a bad what is a bad application of logic versus a good application of
see,
logic?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not prepared. I don't have enough
So
data backed up. So let's
so
change the subject.
you've got is it a gut feeling you have that it's a bad application of logic, or that's what it feels like?
It could be. I don't know at this point, actually. And so for me, it's there's zero value in continuing this conversation because I don't have good information.
See, yeah, to me, logic can be good or bad, but you can get a bad result with good logic.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I don't know. I don't have enough data. I haven't studied it or whatever like that. So the logical thing for me to do is stop talking about this because I don't know. I don't have enough information. It's like the problem is when you're building up something from lower level stuff, you need to make sure you carefully define the lower level stuff and that you apply good logic, good proofs, so that your level 2 and level 3 and level 4 thinking is solid based upon the foundational
So,
stuff.
so let's talk about smoking and how the viewpoint on smoking from the 50s changed to what it was in the 70s and then in the 2000s.
Okay.
Right? So originally, smoking was something a lot of people did. They felt
Yeah.
good doing it.
Yeah.
Doctors in the 40s and 50s, many of them had no problem with it. Many of them smoked. And many of them actually said it's good for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because it's relaxing, you're taking deep breaths, all of that sort of thing. And that
Yeah.
was that was their that was marketing and other things, but it was also their logic. The doctor was saying, "Hey, you're sitting there, you're relaxed, you're taking deep breaths, you feel good. It's obviously good for your body."
Yeah.
Right? And then we realize now that that was wrong. Are you saying that was bad logic?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think what you're trying to do at this point is you're not respecting my role not to talk about this because I don't know. So I don't know why you're constantly trying to pull me back in when I don't have the information.
Well, if we're not going to resolve that, then we can't figure out how we get around to having people see beyond what they see.
Well, no, I already gave you the answer. I said, let's talk about it next Friday. Give me a chance to like review it and like
Okay.
understand logic,
All right.
actually.
All right.
There you go. So let's change the subject. So what are we going to now?
So we've agreed that I'm right for today.
In your mind, I mean, okay, that's what you want to do. Sure. It's all based on your feelings, right? So it's just how you feel is the only thing that matters.
No, mine's based on logic.
Yeah, exactly. Because that makes you feel good, right?
Okay. Anyway, back to your love topic. So
Yeah.
the idea that logic can lack emotion. In fact, our general definition and viewpoint of logic is it has no emotion tied to it. And you're
That's the
saying
whole
that
idea. You try to remove as much emotion from
that's the
it.
whole Mr. Spock Vulcan image is this, a race of people who don't apply emotion and just do logic.
So
And
you see clearly, right?
in Star Trek, they point that out as a weakness. The strength of the human is the fact that emotion is part of our character, right? And so it's almost like you're making the argument that love specifically, but emotion, but love specifically, is the thing that makes us better, and we need to have love tied to logic for some reason, is
Yeah,
what
I
you're
think
saying.
they have to be integrated together. And exactly how much and when do you choose this versus that? I don't know. That's up for discussion. But I believe they're
How have you thought about that? How do you envision love representing itself in someone's logic? I have a thought. But I haven't really tied it to the love logic thing. But I
Yeah,
have a
I haven't
thought.
thought it through very much. But
So
I just know that so if you view love, and especially like the sacrificial form of love, not the form of, well, I love because it makes me feel good because I get a lot of feel good, chemicals inside of me. If you can break it out more of like I'm going to have to take some action that I don't want to take because I believe it's going to be good or helpful for that other person, actually, that represents more of a love to me.
Well, so one of the common problems or ethical conundrums they throw out there is what you're in a scenario where only one person can live, and there's a baby and a woman. Do you let the baby die, or do you let the woman die? Right? And the logical thing, depending on the situation you're in, the logical thing would be to let the baby die because the woman has a better chance of survival, has a better chance of adding to your survival. There's all these logical reasons why letting the adult live makes sense. However, there's an emotional aspect, a feeling aspect that the baby has their full life ahead of them, all that sort of thing.
Well, that's assuming that the logic you said is correct. It could be more logical that the baby live. I don't know. You're saying that that's more logical, but we don't know that.
In a survival situation, having a fully capable adult versus a non-capable child, a baby, the chances of survival would go up by having a capable adult versus an
Well,
infant that you would
now
have
you
to
just
resource
changed
for.
the scenario on
No,
me.
no, I refined it so you understood. That's why I said even when I was describing the adult, the woman, I said someone who's capable of adding to the survival. I said those things when I originally said that.
But
So,
you didn't explain the context of the scenario. You just said
but the idea in the scenario where survival is difficult and you need to make a decision because you can only keep one of them alive, the one that would allow the group the best chance of survival would be the one you would select.
Well,
If
that's a
that
different
wasn't the
scenario,
constraint,
right?
if that wasn't the constraint, if the constraint was once this is over, you have the resources to take care of the child, then it's a different argument.
That's why it's super important to define the constraints first before you apply logic to it.
And what I'm saying to you is there's an emotion argument, and then there is a logic or a rational argument. And in this case, what we may know is the logic. What we may know as the emotional argument may be the one we're all aiming for, even though we know that rationally more people would die in that scenario. So in a scenario where you need as many.
It could be assuming that logic is correct, but we don't know that that logic is correct, right? There'd be another person that's inside of that says, listen, I'm emotionally and logically tied to this, and both of them are going to live. I'm literally going to will that into
Okay, so see, again, now you're changing the rules on it. So my scenario here is the fact that you need only one of them to survive, and you are in a situation where you need all the resources you can to survive.
Yeah, and so that is so what you're doing here is kind of a logical problem, because what you're doing is you're taking a fringe case and arguing that. I think it's better to argue with the most probable case.
No, the fringe case has a purpose. Why do you think what purpose do you think it would serve? Because you're saying
you
you're not
be
saying
right.
No. The fringe case here is to bring up the idea that you have two opposing viewpoints here, and what we feel and what we think don't necessarily align.
Yeah, but here's the problem, though. You can get yourself in trouble by only pulling fringe cases. So typically, if you want to, in my mind, the most logical, let's take the most probable case, and then we can work our way out to the fringe cases. But fringes come last, or are later, actually. And I'm not saying there's not a case for fringe cases, because there is. But
so you know the scenario with I forgot when it was. It was an Australian ship captain when the ship went down. They had a survival boat or whatever, and there were I think 10 people could fit in the boat, and there were 12 people hanging off the boat, and two of them had to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And the or it was more than that. It was like 16, and 6 of them had to go in. There was like an old couple, there was a young couple, there was a young man, there was a woman with a baby, all these types of things. And the captain had to make a decision. All right, you let go, you let go, you let go. And he chose the old couple. What else did he choose? He didn't choose the baby. He chose the old couple, and he had a logic for it. And he was tried for first-degree murder because he had to basically make a decision as to who would live or die. But he was given 1 day in jail because they knew it was an impossible situation.
Yeah,
and his reasoning was based upon how long have you lived. He knew that he couldn't send the old man to his death without the woman, or some combination of that, so he sent them both to their death. I mean, there are a lot of cases where you can make the argument that there is always a logic, right? So this is what I'm saying. There's always a logic to get the best result.
Logic, whether it's the optimal logic or not, who knows, right? I mean, I don't know.
Optimal is going to be based upon your mindset. What are you valuing?
It's going to be based on other things too. If you're having that scenario, it's going to be based on how skilled you are, how much technical ability you have.
So a lot of people say, why didn't the captain, sacrifice himself? And then the argument there is he made the assessment call that he was the only one with skill enough to actually get the boat to a point where they could get rescued, which meant that if he didn't stay in the boat, they would all die.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an unreasonable thing, if that's true, right? If it's true, right. As long as...
So when it comes to court cases like this, there is no absolute truth. There is an objective truth that's of what's going on in his mind, and then the court will make the case. This is the situation. And this is why when a cop says, I felt like I was in danger and I killed that guy, it doesn't matter if he was in danger or not. If he really felt he was in danger, the court will usually agree with him because he felt he was in danger.
Right. Yeah.
And so in this case, logic would dictate he shouldn't have killed the guy because he wasn't in any real danger.
Yeah.
And yet we all agree that it was okay, or I don't know if we all agree, but the general agreement of the court would be it's okay because he felt he was in danger. That was his reality, and therefore he made the decision.
Yeah, and see, I would argue against that, right? I would argue against that in the sense that if it's a cop, he's in an elevated status with additional power that the rest of us doesn't have. And in order to have that certain power, he should be required to have a minimum set of skills so he can better able to handle this pressure that's applied to him. So if you're having a scenario where an average human being was put in that cop situation, yeah, we should go a little bit easier. But in the case that we expect, since he has more power, more responsibility, he should have more capability, we now expect more from him as general.
So all of that's true. Let's say they did expect more from him, and he was still in a situation that was beyond his training and his means. They could have trained the hell out of him. You cannot train someone to the point where they're always going to react the way you want them to react.
No, not always perfect. No, there's always mistakes.
The reaction happens no matter what level of training you say. And so the solution in the future may be better training, maybe scenario training. I don't know. But in that situation, it doesn't matter. They were in a mental state where they thought they were in danger, and they then defended themselves.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right? And so this is that case where the logic was, I'm in danger, I'm going to defend myself, and they made what's a logical decision, but the facts of the situation were improperly interpreted. They didn't see the information. They misread it. Whatever. That's not logic a problem. That is a problem with other aspects of what fed into that.
Well,
right?
in that particular case, I don't know the whole scenario actually, and you'll probably trickle this out over time as I build a case around it, and you'll say, "Oh no, then I throw this one thing in or whatever like that." Because you love to do that.
Why does the scenario matter? You add something, and you can add something to the scenario, and I'll just say yes, but he still felt this way.
Because there's a scenario. Because what you'll say then is I'll go down a logical train. You'll say, "Oh yeah," but then what I didn't tell you is there's 20 cops standing right next to him.
So what if there were 20 cops still standing next to him? He still felt in danger.
Yeah.
The point being, you cannot say what someone feels is wrong. You can punish them for the outcome of that, but the feeling they had was the feeling they had. Their interpretation is the interpretation they had. What you can then do is say, you should not have made that decision, and we're going to punish you for it. But we understand that was the way you interpreted it.
Yeah, it's always more complicated. You have to take that into effect. It depends on the scenario and how bad it was. Yeah, like depending on the scenario, he could go to jail for a long time. Maybe
my earlier scenario to you about do you choose the baby or do you choose the adult? The scenario doesn't matter. You are in a situation where the chances of survival are based upon what resources and capabilities you have. You can either use your limited resources to take care of a baby and let the other adult die, or you can let the baby die and have the adult live and have more resources available to potentially live.
I never like these Kobayashi Manu, whatever it is, things, because
Maru.
Yeah, we need
Maru. Kobayashi is the name. Maru means ship in Japanese, so Kobayashi Maru is the name of a ship.
And so then I don't really like going down in these scenario things because I think they're just really stupid things to go down.
The idea is you test the limit. You test the limit and you walk it back from the limit. So if this is the limit, let's walk it back to then what would be a more realistic scenario.
Let's start at the most common scenario and then go to the extremes. That's what I'd rather do.
I don't know of a common scenario where there's a choice where you have to pick one person that lives and one person that dies.
I don't know either. That's why I don't
think
like
those tend to be extremes if you're in a situation like that.
There we go. So let's talk about the most common things to apply. Instead of picking the most
so the common things, do I want to save them both or let one of them die? And I have the ability to save them both? That's not there's no decision to be made there. If you make the other decision, then you're a criminal.
Right. So
there's no purpose in talking about that because the answer is obvious. The point of this conversation on the edge is the answer is not obvious. So you think through scenarios and try to figure out why one might be more valuable than the other. That's what you're doing.
That's why I don't want to talk about this, because I don't think there's any value to our listeners, right? So what I want, here's the value that I want to add. This was your original question when you first started, is if somebody's in a scenario where maybe they're not making the best decision, right? It could be they have good logic, maybe they don't have, maybe they're misinterpreting facts. How can we improve their ability to make better decisions?
Okay, we'll go back to that.
Let's go back to that.
I was going into the love logic thing because we kind of spun off that and went into love and logic. Yeah, and I was trying to make an explanation here that one thing has to have priority over the other. In your mind, in your
necessarily.
mind, whatever you value the most is going to impact how you decide something.
I don't think you can tell me what's in my mind. Um, that wasn't where I was
Scott, you
going.
have an opinion on abortion, and we've talked about abortion having two different value structures, one on life and one on individual rights. Whichever one is predominant in your mind is more than likely going to be the way you decide on abortion.
Oh, I think you're making assumptions. I don't think you can see in my mind. So I think that's bad logic is what you're using.
See, and now you're not addressing the premise of what I said, but basically saying that I can't see in your mind, therefore my entire argument's wrong. See,
Yeah,
now you're attacking the premise of my argument instead of addressing what I brought up.
well, I wasn't really attacking the premise of your argument. I was attacking the approach that you were using because you were saying something that wasn't true. You were making an assumption. So the problem is,
Okay.
if I'm not allowed to attack a fact that's incorrect coming out of your mouth,
What
then
fact is incorrect?
the fact that you can't see in my mind. So
Okay.
you were assuming that you know exactly what I was saying. So you got to say, yeah, that was a mistake I made, right?
Okay, Scott. When it comes to abortion, why is there a disagreement between? Why doesn't everyone agree on one side or the other on abortion?
I have no idea. I don't know that we'll ever get agreement into it.
You have no idea. You haven't thought about this. You haven't looked into this. You haven't used the 50 some odd years of your life to think about this.
No, not no. Have you spent 50 years?
I've
Then
spent
go
quite a bit
ahead.
of time thinking about why people think the way they think. Yes.
But that has different than abortion, right?
No, because it applies to everyone who has an opinion in life on any topic. I want to understand how their mind works and how they think. And abortion's one of those interesting ones because quite often the person who says they're for abortion, so pro-choice, often also is against abortion as they're somewhat pro-life. The difference is they value the choice aspect higher in priority, in value to themselves than the life value. Whereas the other side, it's usually that they value the life side of it more than they do the choice side of it. So it's a priority issue that then makes you decide yes or no on a topic. It's not a typical black and white of like, well, are you for women's rights or against women's rights? You can be for women's rights and you can be against abortion and still have come on either side of that equation.
See,
You can be
I'm not as strong opinion as you might think I am because it depends on the scenario.
sure.
Depends on why, right? And everybody's got a different version of why.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's a substitution for birth control, I have a problem with that.
If it's a substitution for birth control, you've got a problem with that.
Yes, right. So if there's a scenario that says I made a bad choice or I didn't care, I didn't think through things, and now I have a baby, so I need to get rid of the baby because it makes my life uncomfortable.
No, I get what you're saying, but
That I have, and I'm not saying that's an obvious no to me, but I'm like that's a probably no in my mind, just because of the scenario, just because of the lack of thinking through.
mm-hmm.
Right? It's a problem, and because there's other options, right? You can give it up for adoption. There's other options you can
So
choose.
basically, now you're making the argument that given certain conditions, you're anti-choice, pro-life. But then if you came up with a different constraint situation, you would say I'm pro-life and anti-choice.
It depends on the constraints, the situation. Yes, it depends on that because it's a complicated problem. And I don't think, because what happens is everybody says, are you for abortion or against abortion? I'm like, it's more nuanced than that.
So why does someone who decides to use abortion as a form of birth control change your viewpoint on whether abortion should be allowed or not? What is it changing?
Because that other human being is a human being and they're at their most vulnerable. And you're basically deciding to kill them because of a bad choice you made. I'm like, why should they have to pay that penalty instead of you paying it?
Doesn't that apply to any abortion?
Not in that. It depends on the choice, right? Like now, in case of rape, that's very different. Typically, most women don't choose to be raped, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
That would, I think, to be the definition of rape. Is you choose not to be.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, and I'm sure there might be a scenario we could go to a fringe case where you could argue that she chose
No,
that, right?
I think that the definition of the word, you'd have to pretty severely redefine the word to fit in that.
Okay, but other people could argue, and I could see you arguing a fringe case. But I'm saying let's go into this.
I could construct a fringe case, yes, but it would be a pretty weak one. But
I know. So let's not do that. Let's just go down the middle of the curve, actually. And I say most women don't want. And so that's much more difficult, right? That's
but to me,
much
it's
more
not. To me, what you've done is you've declared a situation where you're saying the woman had choice already,
Yes.
right? So in essence, you are still actually saying she had choice. But what you're claiming here is because she had choice to avoid the situation in the first place, you now claim her choice to have an abortion is lower in your mindset than the right to life in that
Well, wait a minute.
scenario.
So let's very clearly spell out the scenario. So what are the constraints of problem one?
So what this is the claim that I'm making, okay? And
Yeah.
and it's that there are two primary value systems that are in place here.
Yes.
One is that life is important to the point where you don't allow abortion because you just need to save the life, regardless of the situation, right? Now,
Right.
obviously, there's spectrum stuff, but I'm just going to take a hard line. Regardless, you don't allow abortion.
Yeah.
On the other side is no, the right of the woman to take care of her own body and to make her own decisions is paramount to the point where you even allow what you and I might call abortions we wouldn't like because it's for birth control.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
that's your extremes, all right. And where you are on one or the other, if it overrides the other one, that's the side you're going to probably think on. So you're like, I think women should have their rights, but at the end of the day, I think the baby's more important. So I'm going to say no abortion, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now in the scenario you brought in, the constraint you brought in was, well, yeah, but using it as birth control lowers the importance I feel on the woman's rights. I don't think she has the right to do anything she wants with her body when she could have avoided the situation with just a little forethought.
Well, because here's the core argument that I don't accept is that it's her sole right to choose. Because there's another, if it's just her sole body that's affected, fine, 100%. You do whatever you want. But this is another human being. So therefore, you don't get 100% control in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
So
argument.
basically, now you have taken those two extremes, right? Life over everything or rights over everything. And you said, but there are situations where it's not rights over everything. So now in that situation, I've now lowered my opinion on this. So in that scenario, this overrides this.
Because it's two human beings, it's not one.
I get it. But what I'm saying is you have now taken those two value propositions, which are the core argument of where you stand on this, and you've adjusted priority. So if your priority first was women should have the right to do whatever, but they need to show a little bit of common sense or of pre-planning or whatever. So actually it's a little bit less.
Yeah, right. Her right to choose. See, I don't even like that premise. Her right to kill the baby. I'd rather use that language.
Sure.
Is not as strong as before, right?
So yeah. By the way, I think everyone's gonna who doesn't want to hear this is probably gonna look at us as two dual guys just talking about women's rights.
Yeah,
like we know what's going on. But so the other argument though is, let's say I'm for baby whatever. But then I start applying, but it's still just a clump of cells until X weeks.
If that's true, then
they're human cells. Yes, I'll give you that because science says they're human. But you know what? At what right do they have the right to sovereign rights or what? I don't know what the heck you call it. But yeah, they have the right to actually have protections in and of themselves.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so now someone who actually has a very high value, they go, but yeah, so I think that they're not quite a human with full rights until a certain point. So now that goes down and this goes up.
Yeah, right.
What I'm saying is there's two core values here that you are now applying constraints to that change the priority in your mind.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. It's all it's two different priorities. Whichever priority takes precedent in your mind at the time, constraints or no, and the constraints can change it. That is the way your mind sees the world. You say, this is the decision I make based upon this. You can caveat the hell out of it, and that will change the priorities. But it's all about,
Yeah.
so your mindset and what you're seeing and what you're not seeing, that is going to have an effect on your decision.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to what I was saying before is you're going to alter based upon what's priority for you. And what's priority for you is going to be based upon what you see in the situation at hand. Priority for me is going to be what I see in the situation at hand. And the only way we're going to ever align is if we have equal agreement on the values, on the priorities, and the values of things we're applying against those priorities.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So what's your point? Of course. Yeah, right.
So the point is,
You can apply
something like
that logic
abortion is
to
going to be
anything.
almost impossible to do because these are two very different priorities, right?
Yeah.
They're not opposite priorities. They're different priorities. If we find something though that we can discuss where we can come to agreement on the priority value, then we can potentially come to alignment on the way we think about it and agree on that.
Yeah. If alignment's important, I don't know, it may not be important, right?
Well, even if it's not alignment, what I'm saying is, what I assume, this is a bad assumption. I am taking the thought that getting to alignment is getting to the best truth we can.
Oh no, 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 no. Yeah. No, I don't think that is true or whatever.
Well,
I think
if truth is what you and I agree upon, if
yeah,
there's
that's
two of
the
us, it's
best.
what you and I agree upon. If you're an individual by yourself, so going back to the woman and the bear and the man idea here,
Yeah.
right? If we want someone who's misinterpreting the world and says, all men are dangerous
Yeah.
and are going to hurt you, right? That is not aligned with the factual evidence that's out there in my mind. So
Yeah.
how do
Right.
and that factual evidence will get you as close to the most objective truth possible. It doesn't mean it's 100% right because again, it's through the filter of your mind. But how do I get someone to expand their view to see more of the facts that are out there so they come up to an outcome that's much more aligned with those facts?
Well, so here is one thing I think, and I assume you're doing this. This should be a premise of our little tribe we're trying to put together, like how to think about things, right?
Mhm.
And so I would think one of our key points should be that in most cases, right? Maybe not all, maybe most, I mean, maybe I could argue for all, is that we should think in terms of truth as how true is it? Not is it 100% true or is it 0% true? That there's some sort of a spectrum that you've got to think about, which
Well,
I know is very uncomfortable.
that goes against the idea of what we were talking about, that whatever you and I agree upon is true, is our truth.
Yeah, that's our truth actually. But but this is another question. Is there an absolute truth, right?
Well, that's an argument that goes on
Maybe,
forever,
maybe not. Yeah, yeah, we'll argue that forever, actually. So then, in
right? And
that case, then I think the only safe thing is you have to view truth as a spectrum. How true is it? I think you got to think in terms of probability
I
and
think that's
avoid the black and white as much as possible.
I would love to believe that, but I have a hard time. I think truth is based upon what you have, what you can have at your disposal as facts to come up with whatever conclusions you come up with.
Well,
So
I think you're conflating what you believe is true versus is there an absolute truth, right? And so if there is an
and that's what I'm saying.
absolute,
I don't think there can be an absolute truth because you would have to know everything, and of course, you can never know everything.
yeah, that's a question is how close
So
then the
so
question
so
is how close can we get to being something is true then?
Well, so the doctors who used to say smoking was okay based upon what they knew at the time, they were making a truthful comment based upon their understanding of the universe, of the world at the time. As
Well, many
information
of them
came
had
out,
checks written to them
as
as well
as
too.
if oh yeah, but as information came out that said no, look, people are dying from lung cancer and from smoking and all these other things. As that happened, and more information, more factual information came into the body of knowledge that everyone had, they now had a different truth. They arrived at a different truth based
Well,
upon
that's
that.
assuming that they learned something. I know from just a little bit of research I've done on this that the tobacco companies knew that this was bad for you, and they lied and they paid off doctors, which I've been in marketing a long time. I know that is probably the more probable solution. In fact, there's a doctor today that believes smoking is good for you. Dr.
Yeah.
Gundry went on a podcast and said it's
So,
good for
so
you.
Scott, instead of trying to point out the flaws in that specific scenario, let's
Yeah.
talk about just, I'm going to go generic then. So now you can't do that. All right. A generic situation where someone has knowledge today and logically comes out with a what they feel is the truth.
But I
Tomorrow
think
has new information, now has a different understanding of the world, and has a new truth.
I thought you didn't like putting constraints on things we talk about. I thought you just let us open it up to talk about anything we wanted to.
Well, no, I think the idea here is you're missing the point by going into that saying, well, in that scenario, they were being paid off. Yeah, they were, but that's not the point of the comment was not that. The comment was in a world where you've got a series of facts and then you put those together and you come up with your conclusions. That's the truth as you understand it. So what is the truth? To me, the truth is only the facts and that you agree upon. What you do with those facts and what you determine is going to be based upon your mind and what you know and how you think about it. And you'll never know all the facts. So the absolute truth would mean you would have to have the knowledge of God to have the absolute truth. There's no way. So absolute truth then becomes almost meaningless because it's not something we can measure against.
So that was my point. And let me go back to my original thing. Is like I think you got to view truth as a spectrum. How true is something? How confident are we about this truth?
Against what?
Against the observable stuff that we can see. So let's go back to your man-bear problem, right?
Yeah.
So if we were to observe every single man's behavior, there's no doubt there is some bad men in this world. And there's some men you'd rather have the bear. And there's other men that, depending on the man, you'd rather have the man than the bear. It depends, right? And I would say that you'd probably be better off just choosing the man over the bear.
I would
that
agree with
doesn't
that.
mean you're not going to get a bad one, but just statistically speaking, probability wise, you're probably going to be better off by choosing the men. Probably.
Yeah, I've got all kinds of concerns about what you're saying, but personally, I agree with what you say, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Because statistically, if you look into the world, there's probably more good men than bad men.
Yes. Now, you're assuming someone's going to look into the world and see a broad spectrum of information and see the population of men and be able to make that assessment.
Yeah,
right. And what I'm saying is when the information you have is filtered for whatever reason down to just seeing the bad ones, then your truth is going to be based on the facts available to you. And it's that men are dangerous and therefore I don't want to be around men.
Well, so I think I think I want to nuance this, not the facts available, but the way you interpret the facts available to you.
Yeah.
Because
why are the facts available to you? They're not always available to you. That's the problem.
Well, no, I'm saying the facts that are available to you in that particular case. You got to ask, how true are these things? Because there's cases all the time where you can have multiple people look at the same set of facts and they'll have different outcomes. They'll interpret the facts differently.
Yes, and Scott, you're adding another variable. You're adding other people's interpretation of it. The idea here is a person who looks at facts that they have. If the facts are all aligned towards one side or the other, or one viewpoint or another, the outcome of that person's logical thinking is, "Wow, this is true," when in fact it may be the opposite or wrong.
Yeah, very possibly. In fact, almost certainly, right?
Right.
It's going to be wrong.
Just because there's more information out there doesn't mean the person in that scenario has access to that information or sees it for whatever reason. Just like a doctor today won't know all the information available until tomorrow or the next year or in 10 years from now or 100 years from now. So they make a decision based upon what they know.
Here's my overall premise. I think if we're going to teach somebody how to think through things, and it's obvious we can't even think, right? Because we can't even agree on points, actually. So let alone how are we going to teach something to somebody else? So we've got to do work ourselves, right? So that's one fact that's becoming clear to me. I think you're safer if you make the assumption that we've got to operate in the gray zone, that we cannot be sure about anything. But that doesn't mean we can't be more sure about things and other things. It just like, how confident are we in that? So I think you got to. So a fundamental way to think, in my mind, is think in probability. And some of the smartest people think in terms of probability.
I think in probability. I'm sure you think in probability. To me, that is the way I think, and I agree with you that if we can get people to think in probability, that's great. It also requires a lot more mental energy to think in probability because you actually have to hold potentially differing ideas in your head that actually contradict each other, and then prioritize in your mind the likelihood you think that one is real over another.
Chris, I never said this was going to be easy, right?
So
Jiu-jitsu is not
so
easy.
so I mean,
Hard.
just like we were talking about this, several episodes ago, when there are some people who are saying everything that Trump's doing is designed to destroy America, right?
Yeah, that's probably not true.
So, okay, but you go through a thing in your mind. You're going, okay, what are the possible scenarios here? He's trying to destroy America. He's trying to save America. He's doing something in between, right? And you end up with, I don't know, 5 scenarios in your head that go from, yeah, that's a 30% chance of that. There's a 20%, and I'm throwing out a number, but you're saying that's more likely, that's less likely. So
Yeah.
you pull that in your mind, right? So that requires you to either have information that is contradictory that you can feed into each of those models, or to be able to generate um, a world where you can come up with, you can theorize facts that would make that real,
Yeah,
right?
and I get and there's no doubt doing this at advanced level is difficult. But I'm saying even if we can just get across the point of just at least going down this thought process, just as saying that, I may have some things I believe are true in my head that may not be true. I mean, even just that can move you in a really good way to look at it
Well,
in a different way.
I would even say I don't want to attack someone's thinking yet. I first want them to ask, how do I know that the information I'm basing this off is true?
I mean, that's a reasonable thing to do. Yeah.
Right? And I think you call into question the accuracy of news reporting. You call into question
Of course.
how information comes out. We call into the fact that we have a bias to remember the negative and not the positive. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we have to do. But a lot of what I just said is you have to have a broader knowledge than just the 3 pieces of information you've got. You've got to think about, well, what do I know about media and how much do I trust them? What do I know about marketing and how much do I do that? What do I know about the human mind and how it works? And all of this is predicated on the idea that you have a broader base of general information in your head that allows you to question things like this.
Yeah, and I don't know that it has to be super refined because, you can, like, just being jujitsu at a low level, you can be very effective. You're not a black belt at jujitsu. There's a million things you don't know, but you still know a lot more than the average person. So what I'm saying is you don't need a PhD in critical thinking. Maybe just a little bit can really help you make better decisions. That's my point.
I would argue you don't even need to be that good at critical thinking if you've got the wisdom and experience to draw upon and you apply that to a scenario.
And almost all people have that, right? I think
Well,
the average person,
they build that, right? That's why elders and medicine men and sages and all these people throughout history have been respected for their ability to think and know things, right?
yes,
You can be very intelligent and logic your way through things and come to conclusions, or you can have just seen so much of the world that nothing phases you and you understand how the world works because you've seen it.
you've seen it a bunch of times. So it's more of maybe not some maybe wisdom. I don't know how I'm going to define wisdom. I don't want to argue about how to define things actually, but I just think that maybe wisdom is very equivalent to pattern recognition. It's like, look, I've just seen this same thing over and over. I see this, and it usually ends up with that. That could be defined as wisdom. You just seen it a bunch of times. You
So
have a
I think
perspective on it.
wisdom is based on experience and intellect. When you're younger, intellect's more important than experience because you're going to have less experience. When you're older, they tend to balance out a little bit to where the intelligent experienced person is always going to have an advantage, but the experienced person can still produce good results.
Oh yeah, my gosh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I hope
Yeah.
we can
So
combine those two
I
together.
think the clue here is how do you get people. It's going to be hard to change someone's intelligence. That's going to be tough, but we can help them build more knowledge, which helps with their wisdom.
And it might even not be so much knowledge, it just might be the fact that there's a possibility I could be wrong in my thinking. So let me just for a second put this idea to the side and try to see it from the other person's perspective.
How do you
I
get
mean,
that self-awareness though?
what's that?
What are the things in yourself? What are the skills you've developed that give you the ability to have that level of self-awareness?
I don't know that I define it as self-awareness. Maybe. I don't know. But I'll tell
Uh,
you one skill. If you want an answer, I'll give you an answer. Maybe not the best one. Is the fact that I've been wrong a bunch of times. And I was so sure I was right. And I'm like, it turned out I wasn't right. And so now
Isn't that
that makes me,
experience?
what's that?
Isn't that experience?
Yeah, that's experience, observing patterns. Yeah, observing things. Yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
what I'm getting at is, what are the things that allow you to question yourself? If you don't have experience, you don't have knowledge, and you don't have strong intellect, what are the things that are going to allow you to know to question yourself?
Well, I don't like those constraints you're putting. So I'm not going to answer that question actually, because most people have a certain amount of that, enough to at least suspend. Let me see it from his perspective just for a second. I think almost everybody has that. I believe in people enough that now maybe it's not perfectly refined and maybe it can be improved and all this sort of stuff, but I believe most people have that ability.
So now I'm going to tie this to your earlier topic. That's where your love comes into play.
I suppose. I don't know.
So
I
when
don't know.
someone says or does something that triggers an emotion in you, you still have enough love for other people, for mankind, for that person, to be able to say, wait a second, let me understand what they're trying to get across, right?
I
So
think
if you're
that's
stuck in yourself, you're not going to be able to do that. You've got to get to a point where you want to understand what the other person feels. And why would you want to if you didn't care for them? So you've got to show enough caring. And it doesn't have to be one-to-one caring. It could be, I just consider, other people to have some level of import to me.
yeah,
And
right.
therefore, I'm going to show some caring and thought and try to understand what they're saying, what they're thinking, what they're doing. So that's where I think I do agree with you that love is an aspect. I don't like calling it love because I don't think it's just straight love. It's a respect and a caring for other people at a level that puts you in a mindset to wonder whether there's more to the story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think most people define that as love, right? I mean, is
Yeah,
that
but we're talking like love of family, love of mankind, love of your city, your community, your state, your country. I mean, there's all kinds of love, right?
yeah,
But the idea here being, in order to be able to consider someone else's thinking, you have to have enough consideration for them that is what you build into your default thinking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And hopefully, most parents will start to instill that thinking process in small ways in people. I remember there was like an exercise in class where we had like a piece of cake or a candy. I don't know if you did this in school or not, but it's like you would be the person that would cut it, but the other person would decide which piece they
Yep.
had. So you're like,
Yeah.
oh
I
crap,
never I never had siblings old enough to do that with, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
but it's like so these parents or school or something is in some way starting to train you in how to do this.
Hmm.
Holidays do that, Valentine's Day. Oh, let's make a little Valentine note for somebody else. I mean, so just there's just tons of just social pressure trying to teach you to actually be somewhat of a halfway decent human being.
Well, I was talking to someone in our Toastmasters group today, and they were explaining that there was a situation at work that they had where they were very emotional after that, and were like, "Oh, yeah, that's it. I'm done. I'm never going to talk to that person again."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, you've had that was yesterday. How are you feeling today? Whatever." And I'm like, "So what was going through your head? What was going through their head?" And when you ask that question, what was going through their head? It's like, I don't know. All right, what could have been going through their head?
Yeah, right. Right.
They just had an argument with somebody. They just had this happen. They had that happen, right? Um, and I've mentioned to you this guy on YouTube, Jefferson Fisher. He's from the South. He's a lawyer, and
Mhm.
he he tells you how to deal with difficult people. Right. Well, so when someone says something rude or insulting, his thing is what? Did you mean to say that, or did you mean to offend me, or
Yeah,
what were
yeah,
you thinking when you said that? Those are the things he
yeah,
says. But imagine if you at least do that in your mind. If not, do that out loud.
yeah, yeah. If you can, if you can, if you can. So here's my thought for you. This is another. In fact, I'm going to write this down because I think this is important. Hang on a second, Chris. I'm going to write this down. So if you have an interaction with somebody and they say or do something that causes you to get bugged or pissed off or emotional or something, I'm going to say that you need more tools slash training. This is the essence of jujitsu. Because in the beginning of jujitsu, man, you'll get freaked out over the slightest bit of pressure. But as you get two things happen, as you get more accustomed to the pressure, and you start to realize, oh, this is really not going to kill me. It feels like I'm going to die, but they're not harming me in any way. And you start to develop tools to alleviate some of that pressure and eventually start to attack back. You don't get as freaked out 6 months or a year in as you did day one because you have better tools. So my statement is that if you find your feathers getting ruffled, should be a signal to you saying, oh, I need more training. I need more something. I don't have enough skill capacity to deal with this.
I don't disagree with you. I'm still wondering on how we get someone to, I guess, not to ignore your feelings, but to downplay them long enough to allow these tools to surface.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why probably, Chris, this is going to take us another 20, 30, maybe 3 years more. Maybe it might take us another 150 podcasts to take these thoughts that we have and to get clear in our head and where we can agree and where we can actually use a certain kind of language and articulate things in a way that other people will say, not that you're right, but that that's right. That, yeah, you guys have distilled this down into something that makes sense, you know?
So if someone insults you and you're offended,
Yeah.
what's going on in your head? So
Basically,
if I insult you in a way that really upsets you, or that
yeah.
triggers you, what's happening in your head?
Well, you just get angry. You get your 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, basically, right? You're out of control. You're literally
Are you
that other person.
aware? Are you aware you're upset, or are you strictly reacting?
I don't know. It
I
probably, depending on how much it is, you could be a little bit of aware, but you could be completely out of control as
so
well.
I think we need people to become aware of that they're having an emotion,
Yes.
and
Yes.
before they react to the emotion, they need to apply a couple of questions. Your tools you're talking about. So the one is goes,
Yes.
wow, to identify what is the emotion. Wow, I'm offended. Wow, I'm angry. Wow, I'm whatever. Right? I mean,
Yes.
just asking that question in my mind diffuses the the emotional reaction, because you're now quantifying or defining what's going on. Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
I
I'm
think
angry,
you're onto something really good for once,
right?
Chris. You're
And
onto
so that's the
something.
first that's the first thing you say is, oh, I'm angry. I'm angry, or that, and then you say, why am I angry? Well, because
No,
so
no, no.
you follow that. Go
We
ahead.
got to back up. It's too much. That you can't go there yet. Actually, what you have to do is you have to identify a feeling in your body. Something you got to feel something, and you've got to be able to stop that before you get out of control. So you only have the tiniest bit of time to do this.
Yeah.
This is really critical you get this right.
So you and I talking blah blah blah. We're talking back and forth. We're having a conversation, and then you say something, or I say something that insults you somehow, that offends you somehow. Whether I mean to or not is irrelevant. Something I say offends you.
Yeah.
Okay. The
Not
tone of
offends
it.
me, you annoy me. That's what happens. You annoy me.
No, but I think if you're annoyed, your emotional reaction is going to be different than if you're offended.
I guess I don't know. I normally get annoyed with you. I don't really get offended by you actually,
I
because
know,
what
no,
happens?
that my point is I'm trying to work out if so, because the issue we're going to have is someone has an emotional reaction that they can't overcome. So we need it to be a strong reaction. Being annoyed with someone doesn't necessarily trigger you doing something that's not the best in that situation. I'm worried that someone's going to have an emotional reaction and then blow up in a way that actually is really bad for the situation.
Yeah, yeah, no, that happens. Yes, exactly. But first, it's like typically most people don't go from 0 to 100 instantly. There's some things, and they may not even know this yet, but this is why you got to rolling around in jujitsu, because you start to feel a little bit of uncomfort, and it could be half a second before you see red. But man, in that half a second, you've got to manage your
So,
emotions,
so
right?
you, I get your analogy with the rolling around. What is the rolling around in this scenario? Is what I'm trying to get to. So you and I are talking back and forth, boom, 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 and I say something, and it changes your thinking, and we're no
Um,
longer in a conversation. We're now in an argument. We're in a, you know, it's escalated in your it's escalating in your head at that moment,
yeah,
right?
right.
And so what we need to get you to examine it before your emotion takes over.
Hang on a second. I'm going to back up. That may become later. What we've got to do first, and this is probably not an intellectual thing, it's probably a physical thing. It's like I need to return back to my body. I need to get back in control. And so the best thing from jujitsu that you can do is take a breath. That's the immediate
Sure.
response. Because you've got to slow this thing down because it could explode, right? Otherwise.
Why do you need to take a breath? What's triggering your need to take a breath?
Because it's not a mind thing. The it's literally when somebody gets angry, they literally lose their ability to think. They literally lose their mind. They're out of their mind, literally.
I get all of that, but
And
what is
so
the thing that you recognize that means I'm taking a breath here?
that means I can feel something in my body. And for me,
There's a reaction. Is that what I'm getting at? There's a reaction, and before that reaction turns into an emotion that you act on, you need to identify what's going on.
I
So the
don't know
breath
that
is
I have
important.
that ability. I do, but I
The
do.
breath
It might
the
be.
breath gives you the chance to take that moment and go, okay, wow, the scenario changed here. Wow, he got aggressive. Wow, yeah, it's like this is not the conversation we were having a moment ago. Something has changed, and now I've got an emotion that's kicking in, right?
I don't
So
even know. I don't know. Hang on. I gotta hang on a second. You're trying to describe it with words, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to describe a feeling with words, and I'm a really bad interpreter. So does that make sense? So I'm not thinking. I'm just reacting to what my body's telling me to do,
But
and
you
my
but you
body's
were
saying you need
thinking
to breathe.
before your body started reacting because you were having a conversation, you were using words to communicate your thoughts. You were hearing words and translating those into thoughts. So you
Don't
were thinking before emotion came into play here.
I don't. Hang on a second. Maybe I'm not 100% sure. I'll give you that I was thinking. I don't know how well I was thinking. There
Okay.
was some
Well,
thought, but at some
just
point,
walk through that scenario where I insult you or I say something, I just say something that upsets you. Walk through the
really,
scenario of how you react to that.
I don't know, Chris. I've got to. What I've really got to do is I've got to replay some of these scenarios so I can watch it from a third person, so I can be out of like. I know what I was feeling then, but what happened? But I need to analyze. I can't right now. You're asking me to describe something that I can't. I don't have the words for it.
So what I'm saying is there's a discussion back and forth. There are feelings going on during the discussion. There's no doubt, right? Yeah, you're happy to communicate. You're happy to get your point across. You're happy to win a point against the other person, whatever it is. But they're not the kind of emotion that's going to override your ability to act I'll say rationally. I'm not sure that's the word I want.
Think. Let me change you to think clearly, right? But here's
Sure.
what happens in me.
Sure.
Is like, if I'm calm and relaxed, totally in a beautiful, like, what do they call it, flow state. I'm thinking. My thinking's very clear, maybe near 100% of my capability. But as my emotion increases, my thinking starts to decline, and I'm aware. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not thinking as rationally as I was. I can still think, but I can see this movement happening quickly. So I don't have a lot of time to do that.
I don't know that as your emotion rises, you're aware that your cognitive thinking is going down, because I think what happens is the emotion is getting all the attention and you're not paying that much attention to your cognitive ability anymore. And
No, I'm
so
telling you what's happening to me. So you can't change my definition of it.
yeah, well, I'm not
I
going to
mean,
say I don't care what happens with you, but I'm trying to extrapolate the scenario in a way that we can figure out a way to interrupt this so that people can stay in a clear
well,
thinking mode.
define how it works for you. Define what you feel. Are you aware of your feelings and what your feelings in your body, and that you can't feel
Generally, what
it?
happens with me is there's a conversation, and if something comes across that my mind interprets as aggressive against me or somehow insulting against me, then my mind goes, was that an insult? And how should I react?
So
I
do
actually
you
wonder
not
how I should
feel
react.
anything? Do you not feel anything?
Generally, the feeling would come later after I
Is
said, my first thought is that could be interpreted as offensive. Am I supposed to interpret that as offensive? That's how
so
my mind works.
let me ask a question. I got a question for you, and I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure because you may be different than me. Is that you're feeling, but you're not aware of what you're feeling? I guess that's what my question is, right? Is your body telling you something, and you're not. This is not meant to be, what do you call it, insulting in any way, but you don't have the EQ to sense that there's something going on in your body.
There are there are few trigger things that will get an immediate emotional response in me that even with those, I don't tend to show those emotions because I don't show emotion if I can avoid it.
But can you
That's just the
feel
way
it,
I
though?
grew
That's
up.
a different question. Can you
Well,
feel
so
it?
I think I've gotten so good at not showing emotion that I don't let my body feel the way you're talking about it. I understand you're thinking that I'm not recognizing the feeling, and I don't. It's not that that doesn't happen, but I also don't think I feel things to the same level as other people do either. I think
That
it's a
is very possible.
combination of things.
You know, be
I think
so
I conditioned myself to make feelings subservient to my logic.
maybe. I mean, that's very possible. That's interesting. You know, what'd be so fun to do is to hook up some sort of. We should try to get this some
Like a
sort
lie
of bio,
detector and see how we react.
not some, but some sort of biosensor, so that would
Yeah.
literally be able to measure what our bodies can
I
do.
get
And we may not.
excited. You hear me get excited and argue and all that kind of stuff. Um, but even when I'm really loud and pushy, I'm not angry. And I have had people who think that when I'm in an argument that I'm angry, and I'm not.
That's so interesting because if we from a good scientist, right? Good logic scientist, whatever you want to call it. If we could literally start to analyze this stuff and break it down and measure it in a way that we could like time it exactly to the video and then go back and replay the video and like look at both of our biosensors and literally indicate what our body's telling, because we may not feel it or not. I don't know, right? Who knows, right? Because
No,
you can only know what you feel when you feel it.
I'm just wondering if when something that offends you comes across, does your body note a change in your mindset, a change in your feeling, just a change? I'm not even going to define what the change is.
For me,
So
absolutely.
we're having a conversation. Something I say triggers you as it's a topic that you know, and you get offended. So now you realize that the interaction has changed. Can you use that as your internal trigger to start analyzing what's going on?
I mean, I would like to think I could. I don't know if I have that capability, right? I don't know because all I sense is what I'm feeling. That's why what I want to do is go back and replay it. I remember what I felt, and I replay it as a third person. Then I have more information, right?
Yeah. Hey, I would have a hard time remembering what I felt because in general, I don't know that I have those feelings.
That's why I want to get some biosensor thing that I can hook up to me that's time coded to the video. So now you can look at the stimulus and look at the actual response, right? And
You
then
got to
you
see
can,
if you can find. You got to see if you can find someone who can run a machine like that for us.
well, I'm sure I could buy one on Amazon, some little, I'm sure for just like 50 or $100.
How good it would be, but yeah.
I don't know. We'll see, actually. But wouldn't that be interesting? Because now we can start to apply measurement to how we feel, and we can maybe start to correlate things
Well,
together.
my concern would be someone who hears something and has an immediate feeling that's so strong that it clouds their thinking.
That happens all the time.
I want us to identify what's happening right before that feeling gets that strong, which is why you want to do this measurement. I understand. We want to identify that and see if there is something that you can do in that moment that keeps you in the clear thinking mode. You can have the feeling you're talking about, but still maintain enough clarity of thought to then give the other side the grace that maybe they weren't trying to be insulting. Maybe they weren't trying to be this way, right? So there's so many phrases out there like, what is it? Never, the one I've been using this week, never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. Right? Don't assume everything is meant to insult you. Don't assume everything is meant to anger you and be bad. If you're reacting that way, you need some way to trigger the thought, is this supposed to make me angry?
Well, boy, now you're putting value judgment on emotions, and that's a very slippery
No,
slope,
no, 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 no.
actually.
Is this supposed to make me angry is not the same thing as am I angry?
No, I understand, but I don't know how you define if something's supposed to make you angry or not, you know?
Because if the other person is intended to be insulting and anger you, that their intent is incredibly powerful here. One thing is how I react to something that's totally internal to me, and the other thing is someone trying to push my buttons.
Oh, but here's the thing, though, is like I consider that my responsibility because if you can anger me like without my okay, then that's my problem, not your problem. I need to do more training.
But in recognizing whether they're intentionally doing it or not will then dictate how I respond.
Oh yeah,
If
no,
I
right.
think they're trying to be insulting to me, then maybe I'll get sarcastic or snarky back at them, or I'll tell a joke, or I'll give them a jibe, right? So, what I'm saying is, I need that moment to understand if if the situation feels different because of something.
Yeah, right.
I needed a way to assess what is happening. Oh, I'm getting
Yes.
angry or I'm getting upset. Are they expecting me to get upset? Which
Yeah,
means
right.
that they intended me to get upset. Now what
Right.
do I do?
Yeah, I
That's
like
what I
that
want to get
language
to is
better.
that,
If they expect you to get upset, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
right? So
I like that better than if, yeah,
going through
if
that
you
logic
should.
flow. Well, the point is, am I supposed to be angry here? Meaning, are they intending for me to get angry here? Right?
Yeah, but that's a different thing though, because that to me that's a so radically different scenarios.
So am I supposed to get angry here, or are they trying to make me angry? Those are two different things to you.
To me, it's a like night and day difference actually in my
Not to
mind.
me. Not to
I
me.
know. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In
I
this
got you.
scenario we're sitting in, am I supposed to get angry? Right? If I see a video of a dog being tortured, I'm assuming that when I feel sad or angry about that's supposed to happen. That's the way I'm wired to see that.
Could
Right?
supposed to that's yeah. I don't like that term
Right?
supposed to. Right. It's like what I'd rather have you say, or what I'm saying in my words is, am I okay with in that scenario me getting angry? Am I okay with that? Or do I not want to be angry? Because for me, I don't like getting angry at other things because what it means, because here's what it means to me. It means that that other person is now controlling me, and that bugs me.
Yeah. So I think you're harping on the word "supposed to." And to me, the actual frames I'm using takes into account everything you just said.
Okay, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. I just don't like that word actually. So isn't that funny? How boy, one word can have significant meaning to somebody
Yeah.
versus somebody else actually.
To me, the "supposed to" is in this weird scenario we're in is the expected outcome that I'm supposed to have a reaction. And then my second question would be, should I have this reaction, or is it okay to have this reaction?
Oh,
That would be
you put it that way, I'm 100% in agreement with you.
yeah.
Just when you use the word should, I don't like that word.
No, but well, see, I break everything down into multiple steps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Break it in multiple steps. I like that better, actually. Yeah, right.
Well, no, that was it. The first thing is, am I supposed to react here? Is it okay to react here? So
Yeah, do they want me to react?
yeah.
Because here's the assumption, right? And this is the assumption. As you become more emotional, this is what I'm stating to be true, for at least for me, and I think for a lot of people. As I become more emotional, my thinking ability declines. So now I'm not able to make as good of decisions as I did before. So there's a common thing in jiu-jitsu where sometimes they're just bad actors and people are just jerks to, and they're doing just jerky stuff, right? And so there's a whole rule of thought about how you gain position on that person, and now you submit them, and it's always done as like, now they're going to pay for what they did, right? Their bad behavior is now good. They're going to pay for it. And it's a very like non-emotional, but very fun kind of thing. As you choke them unconscious and watch their body just droop down, you're like, yeah, this feels good.
Yeah, we have a lot of feelings. There's a lot of feelings in the human mind.
There is a ton of feelings, and I think you can't get away from feelings, but you've got to manage.
What's the one? Schadenfreude? The German
Schadenfreude?
word for when you take pleasure in other people's pain. When bad things happen to other people, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that I take pleasure. Well, if I get to choke them unconscious when they've been kind of a jerk to me, yeah, there's a lot of pleasure in that.
But often it's a karma thing, right? It's not so much that you want to see other people and be in pain, but when you see something bad happen to someone who you was a jerk, you're kind of like, yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Chris. I don't want to harm them in any way. It's like what I want them to do is I want them to experience a significant amount of pain.
Yeah, I'm not talking about harm. Just when bad things happen to people, sometimes in certain situations, you might enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely, actually. And then that makes me feel guilty later, which other emotions, it's like, oh my God, we're just emotional creatures, So yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it's like when you're watching videos and like someone will, a lot of the shorts do this, right? They'll show some really bad jerk of a person treating someone badly, and then at the end of it, the roles get reversed and the bad thing happens to the jerk.
Oh, we love that sort of stuff. It's like, nothing's better than a good revenge movie. When somebody does something really bad, then it's okay to kill them. It's like, in fact, like make it hurt.
No. See, so this is where it comes into play. When you see a bad character in a movie, and I mean like really evil, pure evil,
Yeah.
and then the good guy just shoots them. I'm like, you didn't make them suffer enough.
No. Wait a minute. You cheated me.
Yes, they did all those bad things, and all you did was shoot them.
Yeah. It's like, what is it? One of the John Wick movies, he's in there and the bad guys come in and they killed his dog. And it's like,
Yep.
That's it. That is it. Kill my wife, fine, but
I mean, that's what happens when you have cartoon characters made into movies, though. So
now you're gonna pay. Yeah, exactly. Well, Chris, I'd like to kind of think about wrapping this up in the next few minutes, if you're okay.
Yeah, we should. Is there any? I'm just thinking because we spent the whole time talking about this stuff. It's a lot of long content to absorb. I'm not sure if we're going to get shorts or anything, or have anything to talk about. Is there anything we want to talk about that happened this week? That I mean, you heard that Trump announced that the UK made a deal with the US on tariffs.
Well, I don't really know. I didn't hear that. I don't really watch the news because I don't want to.
So apparently, it all worked out. The tariffs are all now justified. all the bad things that have happened to the economy and the like. Yes, now. Yeah, I mean, they'll be able to spin it as a win. The UK, they're sixth biggest economy in the world. They've negotiated a new tariff agreement with us. Trade agreement.
This is kind of what I thought his agenda was. It's like not really about that. He's just trying to put you in an armbar to get you to say uncle to come to the table pretty much. So, no, that's kind of my thought.
Yeah, but he was being a bully in the process.
Well, of course, that's what he does. He's a bulldozer, man. There's
no nuance to what he does.
Right? No, it's basically I'm going to come up and punch you in the face as hard as I can, and then, well, do you want that again? Oh, okay, no, okay, let's negotiate then. Yeah, he's just that's his style. And the thing is, Chris, is people don't know how to deal with that. He's a
It's
difficult to deal with.
it's like what's his name? The arguments against Doge, right? They found $150 billion in savings. And
I
so
don't know.
now
I
the
don't.
criticism is you haven't found your $1 trillion. And I don't think he will, but I mean, you haven't found your $1 trillion in cuts. And I'm like, yeah, but they cut 150 billion. You don't have to agree with it all, but they cut 150 billion, so
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that there's so many flaws in thinking. I think that we need to put some sort of a charter together or something that talks about these errors in thinking. And
but this goes back to what we were saying earlier. Is it an error in thinking or is it an error in facts that you're using to do your thinking?
I don't know. We'll argue about that quite a bit because let's argue about that next time because I'm going to study logic and I'm going to actually have a little bit more knowledge about logic and the purpose of logic that we can argue about next time.
Okay. All right. See, anything else that happened? We got a new
Current
pope.
events, I
He's an
don't.
American. We have an American pope. First time ever.
Oh, I gotta go. And it's one thing, yeah, one thing that we could argue about if you want, that you were really miffed about the whole Pope thing, and I don't about the 80% thing, and I guess I don't really know what
I was
those.
miffed at the media for making it a big deal when it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, but that's what they do. That's like arguing, getting mad at the dog because a dog barks. So that's just what a dog does. That's just what they do. It's their
A
thing.
dog didn't for 50 years tell me that he was going to be quiet before he barked. The media for years was talking about journalism and we protect our sources and we provide facts and information, and over the past 20 years none of that, that's all gone away. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the whole reason why social media news reporting has gotten so big. It's not just feeding the fringes anymore, it's also feeding people who can't find information anywhere else.
Well, yeah, I guess my question is since you know that, why would you get miffed about the Pope thing? It's like, yeah, of course.
Because I'm worried about what the average person is supposed to take away from that.
Well, that's what we're doing, Chris. We're doing our job here to give the
Yeah.
average Joe,
Well,
the average
but
Jill, some tools, right? To
but I
think.
told you the way my mind was working was you said this fact like it was a horrible thing,
Yeah,
and
right.
I said and my mind goes to, is it really a horrible thing? So this is how my mind works, right?
Yeah,
You're
right.
trying to get you're trying to get an emotional reaction out of me,
And they
and this
did.
is where and no,
And
and
they
this is
did.
what's going through my head is like, what emotional reaction are you trying to get out of me? Was going through my head, right?
And
So
you
just like we said a moment ago, goes, are you trying to make me feel a certain way here? And I'm like, you are, and so I'm going to respond by looking into that. And then once I looked into it and I realized you were just trying to manipulate me, that made me angry at you.
yeah.
Instead of being angry at the Pope or angry at the church or angry at whatever, I'm now angry at you, the media, for trying to make me angry at the Catholic Church or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So back to my original example, why would you get mad at a dog if the dog barks? I mean, that's what dogs do,
Well,
right?
you can get mad at a dog if he's barking. He's noisy. He's annoying you.
This is
That
what
doesn't
this
mean
is
you don't get angry like dogs shouldn't bark. That's not what you're saying. Dogs bark.
This is what the media does, Chris. This is their business. They get you riled up and sell everything. That is their model. That's what they do, right? It's
What
nothing to
they
do with
do is
me.
they build a case against them that I will continue to use against them, and I will use that information with more people, and it will build more momentum against them.
Okay, if that's what you want to do, if that's your hill you want to die on, that's fine. I just don't even want to
What do you mean
watch
I want to
them.
die on it? I've already gone through the whole thing. I'm done with it.
Okay, good. But would you keep bringing it up and up and up and up and over
No,
and
I'm
over?
just saying they elected a new pope. I wasn't talking about what happened last week. I said they elected a new pope, and he was an American, which was actually a big deal because it's the first American pope. He's
Okay.
also Peruvian, so he's also the first Peruvian pope.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay, good. I'm just
Well,
asking you.
he's the religious head of a 1.4 billion people. So
Okay. Whatever. It's like if you want to be one of the 1.4 billion people or whatever. So.
did you see one of the comments someone said when I made the comment that there's only 15 million Jews in the world,
I saw that. They're like, that's a lot of people. What do you
and I'm
mean?
like, no, compared to Muslims with 1.1 million, Hindus with 1.5 billion, I think it is, and with Catholics or Christians with 1.3 billion or some number like that, it isn't that much.
Yeah, exactly. I think I got a comment too. Somebody else commented on it if I remember something I
Yeah,
saw.
I just find some of the comments funny when it comes to that. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, 15 million is a lot, but it's not a lot.
Well, and this is another logical thing. You have to always view numbers not in absolute sense, but in context to proportion size, right? To
Mhm.
something else.
Well, and that's where you can manipulate statistics, right? So statistics as a science is more open about things, and they're very clear and transparent about how they provide information. When you start manipulating statistics, you start portraying it in the way you want to affect the what the person hears.
Well, of course. So I had in my first year of college, I had two classes, an accounting class and a statistics class. And at the intro of the accounting class, the general philosophy was is you figure out what number you want, and then we're gonna show you how to back into that number. And the starting of statistics was there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. And so let's launch into learning how to do it. So yeah, it's all college for me was, at least from a business standpoint, was all about how to use these tools to manipulate the data so you can convince other people you want a certain things. But there was a second part too, Chris. There's a second part that they said, listen, you've got to influence by emotion for other people, but make sure you use logic and critical thinking to understand what this tool is and how easy it is to goof it up. So you've got to make sure you try to remove as much bias from your sample as possible. That was the
Well,
overall lesson from statistics.
somehow statistics got this viewpoint where if you have numbers, those are facts that prove your point. So then people realized that they could adjust the statistics to prove whatever point they wanted, right?
Yes.
And why are statistics considered so valuable when you've got those stupid sports statistics? Like, this is the
Because
first
just
time in 13 weeks that a man has run the bases in backwards on a spring day. What the heck does that have to do with anything?
because you're hacking into people's beliefs that if I bring up a statistic, that automatically means since I'm bringing it up that that's a significant event.
Did you ever see that video of the Toastmaster guy who won the international contest a couple years ago?
Hmm.
He pulls up a cigarette and he starts to light it and he goes, "What?" Right? And he goes, "Did you know that statistically 87% of people who smoke cigarettes live longer than everyone else? And did you
Yeah,
know that when he's another statistic and he goes, "Yes, and those were real facts that I just made up."
yeah, those are real facts.
And he goes on and on. Yeah, I love that one.
This has to do with like pricing. Pricing is a black magic art or whatever. So if you price something at $100, right? Everybody knows, well, you probably just made that up. But if I come in and I say it's $101.37, you know, in your head, you think, oh, that's calculated. That's probably a truer number. And it's just, you don't even think about it. It's just how people just work, right? Just how
Yeah, no, obviously the effort it takes to add that dot 37 at the end of it, right? It makes but it's also like, why do you price something at 99.99? Because then it's not $100.
yeah, because it feels like it's cheaper than $100. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and
yeah.
the thing is, these techniques they still work, but they don't work as good as they used to because more and more people are kind of starting to get familiar with the techniques. You know,
Well, it's
like
yeah. I mean, Costco has their whole pricing. You can tell a lot by the pricing, right? If it ends with a 97, it's on clearance, right?
yeah,
If it ends with a 00, it's on clearance and won't come back or something like that. There's all these different rules for the pricing.
yeah, and these are all common ways to hack people's brains. We should go over all these things too, just to teach people how to use them. Number one, and then two, how to defend against them or whatever. Like you said, an anchor point. Like I said, Chris, you know, we have this charity event and it's coming up, and can you give me $1,000, Chris? You know, it's for the kids and everything. And you got that look on your face. I'm, okay, Chris. Okay, maybe I was a little unreasonable. How about $10? Can you do $10? And you'd be like, fine. Here's your $10 because I've
Well, that's why
anchored it at 1,000.
if
You
I'm
know.
going to sell you a service, I offer three levels. I offer the basic level, the premium level, and the middle level, which is priced closer to the premium level than it is to the basic level.
Yeah, and you typically always want to do premium price first, actually, is what the science says. But a lot of people don't do that, which I find interesting. So maybe they know something I don't know. growing trend.
I just know, like, I was listening to some woman who was selling her services the other day, and she's like, yeah, this is our normal cost, this is our gold tier cost, and this is our platinum tier cost, and this is our gold tier cost, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Silver, platinum, and gold, or so. And
Super
the gold tier cost is much closer to the platinum cost than it is to the to the silver cost.
Yeah. And most people will pick the middle one. Some people will pick the lower one, and then
Because
occasionally,
logically, I don't want to go cheapest, but I don't
yeah,
want to go most expensive. Obviously, something's valuable enough in that middle one that it's worth paying a little extra for.
yeah, right. And typically, like what I would say for anybody doing marketing or sales, a little bit of a tip is that if you have $1,000 product, you have a $500, make a really big product. Make like a $10,000 product as well too, because eventually you'll sell one. And even if you don't sell one, you're going to sell way more of that $1,000 one just because you have that thing in existence. Just
But you know that old story from gosh, what's her name? Martha Stewart.
yeah.
She was selling her homemade pies for like $5 or $10, and they weren't selling, so she upped it to like $20, and they sold out.
Yeah, of course, because people just inherently, if it's more expensive, it must be better.
It must be better. Yeah, it must
Yeah.
be more valuable.
There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it. You'd probably enjoy it. It's something called Predictably Irrational, and it just
I
talks
think
about all.
I've read that one. I've read
It's
that one.
really interesting how irrational we are, but we're very predictably irrational, which is kind of cool, So
Well, I think that our irrationality actually probably is rational in some particular mindset.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
It's maybe it's not rational, but it's very predictable. And so the question then becomes up, if I'm really trying to help somebody, maybe I'm helping them more by selling them a more expensive product because they feel a lot better about it.
As long as you're providing value, I guess you can justify that.
Yeah, many, yeah. Because, but the value could be that they just think it's better. That could be the value. I mean, is there really a difference between $1,000 bottle of wine and a $12 bottle of wine? I mean, is the $1,000 way better?
Between a $12, yeah, I've heard that once you get above like 40 or 50, then it's much harder to tell.
But people
The
still
diminishing returns. The diminishing
yeah.
returns.
And it may not even be as good, but people will perceive the $1,000. That'll be a special occasion. That'll be a different thing. That'll be something.
But it's true on anything you make, right? Like a musical instrument. There's a point at which you get diminishing returns. After that, you're paying for status. You're paying for fanciness and looks and things like that, right?
Yeah,
But
like in the guitars. Yeah,
like
exactly.
a ukulele, up to about $1,500, you get better and better quality. But you get smaller increases in quality.
Yeah.
After $1,500, what you're really getting is, inlays and customizations and things like that.
And a good story that this was made by a man up on a hill talking to God in the Himalayas, and there was only one tree these were made from. There's only 7 in existence.
Have you seen these guys on YouTube who are like, there's like a leather shop that sells shoes, and these are handcrafted shoes, and we've been making these for 80 some odd years, and we're going to close our shop and blah, blah, blah. And they're all AI generated pictures, and they have it on a website. And then if you go and you do a reverse image search on the photos, you'll find them on the Chinese website selling for like a 20th of the cost they're selling it for.
Yeah, stories matter. People want to believe, right?
Yeah, they want to believe. You get them to pay for it.
They want to pay for it, yeah. And they might be actually, and this is the problem with economics, is economics says, well, you're not getting any more utility, right? Because the 1,500 or 2,000 guitar is going to be as good as any other guitar. But I'm telling you, they're getting more utility. That's why they're paying for it. They're getting utility? A feeling, an emotion, a status.
Happiness,
they're getting something for it.
Contentment, happiness. I would agree. Is that utility?
Well, yeah, you defined as utility just how valuable it is to you. My definition of utility.
I'm not sure I agree with that definition, but I do agree. You could get more out of it, right? Like, why do you buy the brand of anything versus the cheap one? Why, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Coke and Pepsi, there is a difference in taste, so there is a distinction.
One's sweeter than the other.
Right?
So here
but at the end of the day,
definition of utility is the total satisfaction or benefit derived from consuming a good or service.
So satisfaction, then it's what you say. Benefit, I'm not sure, but satisfaction, I would use that as your definition. Then, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Satisfaction, benefit. I consider those, close or whatever. And economic theories based on rational choice assume that consumers will strive to maximize their utility. Interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, all right,
Okay.
Chris.
Well, good talking to you. We'll talk later. So what are we following up on next week? Logic?
We're
Or
gonna
no,
we're gonna talk about logic.
logic. Okay.
We're gonna go deep into logic, and maybe later we'll go deep into love, and somehow we're gonna integrate these logic and love together in some way.
I still think love is the way you keep from your emotions overriding your actions.
That's possibly well. Let's just keep. We're just gonna keep just beating on it until we just refine it.
Okay.
In my
Good
mind.
talking to you, Scott. Have a good weekend.
All right, Chris. We'll see ya. Bye.
I'll see you later.